The night Kyle Moretti decided Serena Vale belonged to him, she was standing beneath a chandelier worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, and she had just called him a coward in his own language. Most women who insulted the heir to the Moretti crime family didn't live long enough to regret it. But Kyle didn't reach for the gun tucked against his ribs. He didn't signal his men to drag her outside. He just stared at her with those pale predator eyes and smiled like he'd found something worth keeping. 3 weeks later, she would wake up in his bed with blood on her hands that wasn't hers. But that night, beneath the chandeliers and the expensive laughter, Serena had no idea she was about to lose everything: her safety, her freedom, and eventually her goddamn heart to the most dangerous man on the East Coast. If you want to know how an ordinary girl survives falling in love with a monster, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. What? The Augustine Hotel didn't just host weddings. It hosted empires pretending to be civilized. Serena Vale had learned that lesson fast during her 6 months working luxury events in the city. She'd seen tech billionaires snort cocaine off dessert plates in the Rose Garden suite. She'd watched politicians broker deals over champagne towers, while their wives smiled through Botox and buried rage. She'd coordinated a reception where the groom's father got arrested for racketeering before the cake was even cut. Tonight's wedding was supposed to be different, cleaner. The bride was a senator's daughter. The groom came from old pharmaceutical money. No mob ties. No federal investigations. Just marble floors, silk gowns, and enough flowers to bankrupt a small country. Serena should have known better. She stood near the entrance to the grand ballroom, tablet pressed against her ribs like body armor, watching 200 guests filter through security with the kind of expensive entitlement that made her jaw ache. Her dress was black and unremarkable, the uniform of someone who existed to make other people's nights perfect while remaining completely invisible. She was good at being invisible. At least she thought she was. Check the champagne tower again, her supervisor hissed through the earpiece wedged in Serena's left ear. Somebody said it's leaning. Serena resisted the urge to point out that champagne towers always looked like they were leaning because drunk people kept bumping into the tables. Instead, she murmured, "On it," and started weaving through the crowd. That's when she saw him. Kyle Moretti stood near the far corner of the ballroom, surrounded by men who looked like they'd stepped out of a movie about well-dressed violence. He wasn't the tallest man in the room, but he commanded space like gravity bent around him. Dark suit tailored so perfectly, it looked like a second skin. Black hair swept back from a face that was too sharp to be handsome and too compelling to look away from. Pale eyes that tracked movement the way wolves tracked prey. Serena had researched him after the venue coordinator mentioned the Moretti family had bought a table. Kyle Moretti, heir to the East Coast's most powerful crime syndicate, 32 years old, never arrested despite 2 decades of federal surveillance, rumored to have personally killed at least 7 men, though no one could prove it. He looked bored. One of the men leaning close to him said something in Italian. No, Sicilian, Serena realized as she got closer. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where half the grandmothers still spoke the dialect, and she recognized the rhythm even if she couldn't catch all the words. Then Kyle's voice cut through the noise, low and amused. Talia acidda, pensa chi ciapateni, ma è solo una piccirida caioca a fa a grani. Look at that one. She thinks she belongs here, but she's just a little girl playing grown-up. Serena stopped walking. The words hit her like cold water. Not because they hurt, she'd heard worse from better men, but because Kyle Moretti had the audacity to mock her in a language he assumed she wouldn't understand. Her supervisor's voice crackled through the earpiece again. Serena, where the hell are you? She should have kept walking, should have ignored it, checked the champagne tower, stayed invisible the way she'd been trained. Instead, she turned and walked straight toward Kyle Moretti. His men noticed her first. Conversations died. Hands drifted toward jacket pockets. The air thickened with the kind of tension that came right before violence. Kyle turned slowly, one eyebrow lifting as Serena stopped directly in front of him. She met his pale eyes without flinching. Then in flawless Sicilian, she said, "Meglio una piccirida che gioca a fa a grani ca un uomo ca si nasconi dare a patroni mortu." Better a little girl playing grown-up than a man hiding behind his dead father's name. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Kyle's men went rigid. One of them took a half step forward, but Kale raised one hand, barely a movement, and everyone froze. His eyes locked onto Serena's face with an intensity that made her pulse kick against her throat. She could see him reassessing her, taking her apart piece by piece in his mind. The corner of his mouth twitched, but she couldn't tell if it was anger or something worse. Then he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that suggested he'd just found a new toy and hadn't decided yet whether to keep it or break it. "Well," Kael said softly, switching to English. His accent was faint, expensive, shaped by private schools and boardrooms. "That's unexpected." "You should choose better venues for insulting the staff," Serena replied, keeping her voice steady even though her hands wanted to shake. "Some of us speak more than one language." One of Kael's men muttered something that sounded like a threat, but Kael ignored him completely. His attention stayed fixed on Serena like she was the only person in the room worth looking at. "What's your name?" She should have lied, given him a fake name, walked away, disappeared into the crowd, and prayed he forgot about her before the night ended. "Serena Vale," she said instead. Kael repeated it slowly, like he was tasting the syllables. Serena. The way he said her name made her skin feel too tight. Her earpiece exploded with her supervisor's voice. "Serena, what the fuck are you doing? Get to the kitchen, now!" She took a step back, breaking eye contact for the first time. "I have to get back to work." "Of course you do," Kael said, still watching her with that unsettling focus. "Enjoy your evening, Serena Vale." She turned and walked away before her legs could betray how badly she wanted to run. Sick. The rest of the night passed in a blur of logistics and controlled chaos. The champagne tower wasn't leaning. The bride's mother got drunk and cried through the father-daughter dance. Someone's uncle propositioned Serena near the coat check, and she redirected him toward the bar with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from months of dealing with handsy rich men. But through it all, she felt Kael's eyes on her. Every time she glanced toward his table, he was watching. Not staring, not leering, just aware of exactly where she was at all times, the way you'd track something dangerous moving through your peripheral vision. It made her furious. It also made her heart beat faster than it should have. By the time the reception ended and the last guest stumbled toward the valet stand, Serena's feet ached and her jaw hurt from forcing smiles. She changed out of her coordinator dress in the staff bathroom, pulling on jeans and a sweater that smelled faintly of the lavender detergent her roommate used. The parking garage beneath the hotel was nearly empty when she reached it. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow shadows across concrete pillars and oil stains. Her car, a 12-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door, sat in the far corner where the staff was required to park. She was halfway across the garage when she heard the footsteps behind her. Serena's hand tightened around her keys, threading them between her knuckles the way her father had taught her when she first moved to the city. She didn't turn around, didn't speed up, just kept walking at the same measured pace while her pulse hammered against her ribs. The footsteps kept pace with hers. She was 10 feet from her car when a voice called out, "Miss Vale!" Not her supervisor, not hotel security. Serena turned slowly. The man standing behind her was one of Kael's. She recognized him from the ballroom. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had seen too many fights and won most of them. He held his hands loosely at his sides, unthreatening, but the gun bulge beneath his jacket was obvious. "Mr. Moretti would like a word," the man said. His voice was polite, almost apologetic. "Tell Mr. Moretti I'm off the clock." The man's expression didn't change. It wasn't a request. Serena's throat went dry. She thought about screaming, thought about running, thought about all the self-defense classes she'd taken in college that had felt useful right up until the moment a armed man twice her size stood between her and her car. "And if I say no?" The man shrugged. "Then I go back and tell him you said no. And tomorrow, or next week, or next month, you have this conversation again. Mr. Moretti is patient, but he doesn't forget." Her hands were shaking now, keys biting into her palm. "Where is he?" "Outside, in the car." Serena laughed, high and sharp. "You want me to get into a car with a mobster at 2 a.m. in an empty parking garage?" "I want you to talk to my boss for 5 minutes, the man corrected. "What happens after that is between you and him." She should have said no, should have screamed for security, called the police, done literally anything except what she did next. But Serena thought about Kael's eyes in the ballroom, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. And beneath the fear currently flooding her system, she felt something else. Curiosity. Stupid, reckless, possibly suicidal curiosity. 5 minutes, she said. The man nodded and gestured toward the exit. A sec. The black Mercedes idling outside the hotel's side entrance looked like it cost more than Serena's yearly salary. Tinted windows, chrome accents, the kind of car that screamed money and danger in equal measure. The rear door opened as she approached. Kyle Moretti sat in the back seat, still wearing his suit from the reception, though he'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. The interior of the car smelled like leather and expensive cologne. "Get in," he said quietly. Serena stayed on the sidewalk. "Your friend said 5 minutes. We can talk out here." Cale's mouth curved into something that might have been amusement. "It's 28 degrees outside and you're not wearing a coat. Get in the car, Serena." The use of her first name felt too intimate, like they knew each other, like she hadn't publicly humiliated him in front of his inner circle 6 hours ago. She got in the car anyway. The door closed behind her with the kind of solid, expensive thunk that said this vehicle was built to withstand bullets. The man who'd fetched her from the parking garage climbed into the front seat beside the driver, and suddenly Serena was sitting inches away from Kyle Moretti with nowhere to run. "Drive," Kale told his driver. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Serena's heart kicked into overdrive. "You said we were going to talk." "We are talking. I didn't say we had to stay parked." "Where are we going?" "Nowhere specific. I like to drive when I'm thinking." She pressed herself against the door, keys still clutched in her hand like a talisman. "What do you want from me?" Cale turned to face her fully, and in the dim light from the passing street lamps, his features looked almost unreal, too sharp, too symmetrical, like something carved from marble and given just enough warmth to pass for human. "I want to know who taught you Sicilian." Of all the things Serena expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. "My neighbor," she said carefully. "Mrs. Catalano? She used to babysit me when I was a kid, taught me while we made pasta." "And the insult? Did Mrs. Catalano teach you that too?" "No, I improvised." Kale's smile returned, sharper this time. "You improvised, in a language you learned from an old woman while making pasta, and you chose to insult a man you knew was dangerous." "You insulted me first. I didn't think you'd understand." "That's not an excuse. It's just stupid." The man in the front seat made a choked sound. Kyle shot him a look, and the sound died immediately. Then Kyle started laughing. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was genuine, surprised. The kind of sound that suggested he didn't laugh often and had forgotten what it felt like. He leaned back against the leather seat, shaking his head. "Jesus Christ," he said. "You have no idea how close you came to getting hurt tonight." "I'm aware," Serena said tightly. "I'm sitting in your car at 2 a.m, being driven to an undisclosed location. I'm very fucking aware." Cale's laughter faded, but the amusement stayed in his eyes. "Relax. If I wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's not as comforting as you think it is." "Probably not." He studied her for a long moment, head tilted slightly. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "And you're not afraid?" Serena's laugh was bitter. "I'm terrified. I'm just better at hiding it than most people." Something shifted in Kyle's expression. The amusement disappeared, replaced by something more intent, more dangerous. "I like that," he said softly. "Most people can't look me in the eye without flinching." "Maybe you should surround yourself with better people." "Maybe." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that Serena could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Or maybe I just found one." The air in the car felt too thin. "Mr. Moretti?" "Kyle." "Mr. Moretti," she repeated firmly. "I don't know what you think this is, but I'm not interested in whatever you're offering." "I haven't offered anything yet." "Then what do you want?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize it. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but I intend to find out." The car pulled to a stop outside Serena's apartment building, a fact that sent ice flooding through her veins because she'd never told him where she lived. Kyle noticed her reaction and smiled faintly. "I know where everyone is, Serena. It's how I stay alive." The man in the front seat opened her door from the outside. Serena climbed out on shaking legs, then turned back to face Kyle through the open door. "Don't do this again," she said. "Don't send your men to corner me. Don't show up at my work. Don't—" "I'll do what I want," Kyle interrupted, his voice still soft but edged with steel now. "But I'll give you this. I won't touch you unless you ask me to, And you will ask, Serena. Eventually. The certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. You're delusional. We'll see. The door closed. The Mercedes pulled away from the curb, its taillights disappearing into the early morning darkness. Serena stood on the sidewalk, shaking, furious, and, despite everything, unable to stop replaying the way Kyle had said her name. Pupapang. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling while her roommate, Maya, snored softly in the next room. Every sound outside made her jump. Every passing car made her heart race. She kept expecting to hear footsteps in the hallway, or a knock on the door, or worse. But nothing happened. By the time the sun came up, Serena had almost convinced herself the entire night was some kind of fever dream brought on by exhaustion and too much stress. Then she opened her apartment door to leave for work and found the roses. 24 of them, blood red and perfect, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her rent. No card, no note. Just flowers sitting on her doorstep like an accusation. Serena stared at them for a long time. Then she picked up the vase, carried it inside, and set it on the kitchen counter where Maya would see it and ask questions Serena didn't want to answer. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line of text. Red suits you better than black. Serena deleted the message, blocked the number, and told herself she was done thinking about Kale Moretti. She was lying. Besides, the roses kept coming. One arrangement turned into 2, then 5, then a dozen. They appeared everywhere, at her apartment, outside the hotel where she worked, on the hood of her car in the parking garage. Always red, always perfect, never with a card. Maya thought it was romantic. Some guy is clearly obsessed with you, she said, leaning against the kitchen counter and grinning while Serena glared at the latest delivery. This is like something out of a movie. It's stalking, Serena corrected. It's flowers. It's stalking with flowers. But Maya didn't understand because Serena hadn't told her about Kyle. Hadn't mentioned the car ride or the messages or the way her skin still crawled every time she walked to her car alone at night. 2 weeks after the wedding, a package arrived at the hotel addressed to Serena. Inside was a leather-bound book of Sicilian poetry, antique by the look of it with gilt edges and pages thin as tissue paper. Tucked between the pages was a slip of paper with a single line of text written in sharp black ink. For when you stop pretending you don't think about me. Serena threw the book in her locker and tried to forget about it. She lasted 3 days before curiosity got the better of her. The poetry was beautiful, dark and aching and full of longing in a way that made her chest hurt. She read it late at night when Maya was asleep, tracing the words with her fingertips and hating herself for enjoying it. Then the next package arrived. This time it was a first edition copy of her favorite novel, something she'd mentioned once in passing during a college literature class 6 years ago. There was no way Kyle should have known about it. The realization that he was digging into her past made her furious enough to finally do something stupid. She went looking for him. Keats. The Moretti family owned a restaurant in the North End, an upscale Italian place with white tablecloths and a waiting list that stretched months in advance. Serena showed up on a Thursday night without a reservation, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, and told the host she needed to speak with Kyle Moretti. The host looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Mr. Moretti doesn't take walk-ins. Tell him Serena Vale is here. The host hesitated, then disappeared into the back. 5 minutes later, one of Kyle's men appeared, not the same one from the parking garage, but cut from the same cloth. Big, dangerous, polite in the way that suggested violence was always an option. Miss Vale, Mr. Moretti is in a private dining room. This way. He led her through the restaurant, past tables full of people eating $100 meals, and through a door marked private. Beyond it was a hallway lined with expensive art, and at the end of the hallway was another door guarded by 2 more men. They stepped aside as Serena approached. Inside, the dining room was small and dimly lit, with a single table set for 8. 6 men sat around it, all wearing suits that cost more than Serena's car. They looked up as she entered, conversations dying mid-sentence. Kyle sat at the head of the table, a glass of wine in one hand. He didn't look surprised to see her. If anything, he looked pleased. Gentlemen, he said without looking away from Serena, we're done here. The men exchanged glances. One of them, older, with gray hair and a face like carved stone, opened his mouth to protest. Kyle's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. The older man closed his mouth and stood. The others followed suit. They filed past Serena one by one, some of them staring at her with open curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility. Then the door closed, and she was alone with Kyle. "I didn't expect you to come to me," he said, setting down his wine glass. "I thought I'd have to keep sending gifts for at least another month." "Stop sending me things." "No." Serena's hands curled into fists. "I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing." "It's not a game." Kyle stood, moving around the table with the kind of easy grace that suggested his body was a weapon he knew how to use. "I told you in the car, I want to know you. You're investigating me. That's not the same thing." "I'm learning about you," he corrected. "There's a difference." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woodsy that made her want to step closer and run away at the same time. "You need to leave me alone," Serena said, hating how her voice shook. "I can't." "Yes, you can. You're choosing not to." "You're right." Kael's pale eyes met hers, unflinching. "I am choosing not to. Because the moment you walked up to me in that ballroom and called me a coward in Sicilian, something changed, and I don't know what to do with it except this." "This is insane." "Probably. I don't even like you." "You don't know me well enough to decide that yet." Serena laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You had your men corner me in a parking garage and forced me into your car. I asked you to talk to me. You could have said no." "Your guy had a gun." "My guy always has a gun. That's his job." Cale tilted his head slightly. "But he wouldn't have used it on you. I gave explicit orders. You were never in danger." "I'm supposed to just trust that?" "Yes." The certainty in his voice was infuriating. Serena took a step back, needing distance. "What do you want from me, Kyle? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But I can't stop thinking about you. And I need to understand why." "That's not my problem." "It became your problem the moment you spoke to me in my language." His jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what you did? Walking up to me like that in front of my men, embarrassing me in Sicilian where everyone could understand? You embarrassed yourself by mocking me." "I know. And instead of being furious, all I could think about was how badly I wanted to know who the hell you were." He exhaled roughly. "You made yourself visible, Serena, and now that I've seen you, I can't look away." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a warning." Kyle's expression hardened. "I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you sick, and the people in my world, they notice everything. If they see you with me even once, you become a target, a weakness they can exploit." "Then stop sending me roses." "I should," he agreed, "but I won't." Serena wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to do something to make him understand how completely he was upending her life. Instead, she turned toward the door. Cale's voice stopped her. "Serena." She didn't turn around. "When you're ready to stop lying to yourself," he said quietly, "you know where to find me." Her hand tightened on the doorknob. "I'm never going to be ready for whatever this is." "We'll see." Serena walked out before she could do something stupid, like stay. 3 days later, she was leaving the hotel after a late shift when two men stepped out of the shadows near her car. They weren't Kyle's men. She knew that immediately, the way prey knows when it's being hunted by the wrong predator. "Serena Vale?" the taller one asked. His accent was thick, Eastern European maybe. Her keys were already threaded between her knuckles. "Who's asking?" "Someone who wants to know why Kyle Moretti is so interested in you." Ice flooded her veins. The second man moved to her left, cutting off her escape route. "We just want to talk." "I don't know anything." "Then this will be a short conversation." The taller man reached for her arm. Serena swung, keys first, aiming for his eyes. He jerked back, cursing, and she ran. She made it maybe 10 feet before the second man caught her, one arm wrapping around her waist and lifting her off the ground. She screamed, kicking, thrashing, but his grip was iron. "Shut her up," the taller man snapped, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. The second man clamped a hand over her mouth. Then the lights went out. Not slowly, all at once. Every fluorescent bulb in the parking garage died simultaneously, plunging the space into complete darkness. Serena felt the man holding her go rigid. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from somewhere in the blackness. The man released her so suddenly she stumbled. She heard him fumble for something, a gun, probably, and then a sound like meat hitting concrete. Someone screamed. It might have been her. The lights flickered back on. Kael stood in the middle of the garage like death wearing an expensive suit. One of her attackers lay unconscious at his feet. The other, the one who'd grabbed her, was on his knees with Kael's gun pressed against the back of his head. Behind Kael stood 4 more men, all armed, all watching with the kind of cold detachment that suggested this wasn't their first time cleaning up a mess. Kael's eyes found Serena. She saw him take in her torn jacket, her bleeding lip, the terror she couldn't quite hide. Something murderous flickered across his face. "Are you hurt?" His voice was too calm, too quiet. Serena shook her head, not trusting her voice. Kael's attention shifted to the man kneeling in front of him. "Who sent you?" The man said nothing. Kael pressed the gun harder against his skull. "I'll ask once more. Who sent you?" "Viscari," the man gasped. "Salvatore Viscari." Kael went very still. Then he looked at one of his men and said, "Take him. I want to know everything." 2 men dragged the conscious attacker away. The unconscious one got hauled up and thrown over someone's shoulder. In less than 30 seconds, the parking garage was empty except for Serena and Kael. He approached slowly, like she might bolt. "Come with me," he said. "I want to go home." "Your home isn't safe anymore." His jaw tightened. "The moment Vescari's men targeted you, you became part of this. And I'm not letting you out of my sight until I know you're protected. You don't get to make that decision." "I just did." He held out his hand. "Please, Serena, let me keep you safe." She stared at his outstretched hand. Scarred knuckles, long fingers, the kind of hand that could break bones or cradle something fragile. She should have called the police, should have run screaming, should have done literally anything except take his hand. But her legs were shaking and her mouth tasted like blood, and she was so fucking tired of being brave. Serena placed her hand in Kael's. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "Come on," he murmured. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He led her to the black Mercedes waiting at the garage entrance, and Serena followed, knowing with absolute certainty that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. The Moretti estate sat 20 miles outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and stone walls that looked like they'd been standing since before America remembered it had a mob problem. Serena watched the gates swing open as the Mercedes rolled through, her hand still clasped in Kael's, though she wasn't sure when she'd stop trying to pull away. The driveway curved through manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff. In the distance, the main house rose against the night sky. 3 stories of old money and older secrets, with enough windows that someone could watch you from anywhere. "This is where you live?" Serena's voice came out hoarse. "Sometimes." Kael's thumb moved against her knuckles, a gesture so casual she almost didn't notice it. "I have apartments in the city, but this is safer." "Safer for who?" "For you." The car stopped in front of massive double doors. One of Kael's men opened Serena's door before she could reach for the handle. She climbed out on unsteady legs, still tasting blood from where her lip had split during the struggle. Kael appeared beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. "Can you walk?" "I'm not injured, just pissed off." Something that might have been admiration flickered in his eyes. "Come on." The interior of the house was exactly what Serena expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that probably belonged in museums. But there was something else too, something lived in beneath all the expensive veneer. A jacket thrown over a chair, books stacked on a side table, the faint smell of coffee and cigarette smoke. Kael guided her through the foyer and down a hallway lined with portraits of severe-looking men who all had his eyes. "Guest room is upstairs, second door on the left. There's a bathroom attached. Everything you need should be there." "For how long?" He stopped, turning to face her. In the dim lighting, the sharp angles of his face looked almost harsh. "Until I'm sure you're safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." His jaw tightened. Salvatore Viscari doesn't make moves without calculating the outcome. If he sent men after you, it's because he thinks you're important to me. And now he's right. "I'm not important to you. You barely know me." Kael's hand came up, fingers ghosting along the curve of her jaw so lightly she almost didn't feel it. "You keep saying that like it changes anything." Serena's breath caught. Then footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Kael dropped his hand, stepping back as one of his men appeared. "Boss, he's ready to talk." Kael's entire demeanor shifted. The softness that had been there seconds ago vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. Where? Basement. Good. Kale looked back at Serena. Get some rest. I'll check on you later. What are you going to do to him? His expression told her everything she needed to know. Don't, she said, though she wasn't sure why. The man had tried to kidnap her, had grabbed her, hurt her, terrified her. She should want him to suffer, but the thought of Kyle doing violence on her behalf made her stomach twist. This is what I do, Serena. His voice was gentle, almost apologetic. This is who I am. I know, that doesn't mean I have to watch. You're not going to watch. You're going to go upstairs, take a hot shower, and try to sleep, and I'm going to make sure no one ever puts their hands on you again. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel something worse. Safe. Dios Popat. The guest room was bigger than Serena's entire apartment. King-size bed with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens she could barely see in the darkness. A bathroom with heated floors and a shower that had 6 different settings. Serena stood under the spray until her skin turned pink and the water ran cold, scrubbing away the feeling of strange hands on her body. When she finally climbed out, wrapped in a towel that was softer than anything she'd ever owned, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Women's clothes. Sweatpants and a t-shirt that looked brand new, tags still attached. The right size. The kind of comfortable, expensive basics that suggested someone had gone shopping specifically for her. She tried not to think about what that meant. Instead, she got dressed, crawled into bed, and told herself she'd leave in the morning. She was lying. Fuck. Serena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close, and the smell of coffee drifting up from somewhere downstairs. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The parking garage. The men. Kyle's hand in hers. She sat up, heart racing, and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 7 missed calls from Maya. 12 texts ranging from, "Where are you?" to, "If you don't answer in 5 minutes, I'm calling the cops." Serena typed out a quick lie about staying at a friend's place after a late shift, then shoved the phone back in her pocket before Maya could respond with more questions. She found Kale in the kitchen. He stood at the counter with his back to her, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, wearing dark jeans and a Henley that fit him well enough to be distracting. His hair was damp, like he'd recently showered, and for a moment he looked almost normal. Then he turned around, and Serena saw his knuckles. Bruised, split, cleaned, but not healed. She didn't ask. "Coffee?" Kyle offered, holding out one of the mugs. Serena took it, wrapping both hands around the ceramic for something to hold on to. "What happened last night?" "Vescari's men are no longer a problem." "That's not what I asked." Kyle leaned back against the counter, studying her. "You don't want the details." "Probably not, but I deserve to know what I'm involved in." He was quiet for a long moment, weighing something in his head. Finally he said, "Salvatore Vescari is a capo in the Bellicaro family. He's been trying to move into my territory for 6 months, testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before I push back. Last night was him sending a message." "What message?" "That you're my weakness. That if he can get to you, he can control me." Serena's fingers tightened around the mug. "Is he right? About you being my weakness?" Kale's pale eyes met hers. "Yes." The honesty of it hit her like a fist. "We barely know each other." "I know. Doesn't change anything." "That's insane." "Probably." He took a sip of his coffee, expression unreadable. "But here we are." Serena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was delusional, that whatever he thought existed between them was just obsession mixed with adrenaline and proximity. But she'd be lying, because somewhere between the ballroom and the parking garage, and the moment he'd taken her hand, something had shifted. She didn't know what to call it, didn't know if she wanted to acknowledge it, but it was there, humming beneath her skin every time he looked at her. "I need to go home," she said instead. "Not yet." "Kyle, give me 3 days." His voice was calm, but she heard the steel underneath. 3 days to make sure Vescari gets the message that you're off limits. Then I'll have someone take you home and post guards outside your building." "I don't want guards." "You don't get a choice anymore." Anger flared hot in her chest. "You don't get to make decisions for me." "I just did." He set down his coffee, straightening. "You can be angry about it. You can hate me for it. But I'm not letting you walk into a situation where you could get hurt because I wasn't careful enough." This is kidnapping. This is protection. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Kael moved closer, slow enough that she could step back if she wanted. She didn't. I know you're scared, he said quietly. I know this isn't what you signed up for. But Viscari made you a target the moment his men touched you. And until I handle this, you're staying here where I can keep you safe. And then what? Then you go back to your life. And I stay in mine. Something about the way he said it made her chest ache. You don't believe that, Serena said. Kael's expression shuddered. Doesn't matter what I believe. You deserve better than getting dragged into my world. A little late for that. I know. His hand came up like he wanted to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. I'm sorry. The apology surprised her more than anything else he'd said. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway. One of Kael's men appeared in the doorway, the same one from the restaurant, she realized. Boss, we have a problem. Kael's entire body went tense. What kind of problem? Viscari called a meeting. Tonight. He's demanding you show up alone. Fuck. Kael scrubbed a hand over his face. Where? Neutral ground. The warehouse district. 8 o'clock. It's a trap. Probably. The man's expression was grim. But if you don't show, he'll take it as weakness. And weakness gets people killed. Kael was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then he nodded. I'll go. But I'm bringing backup. Position men on the surrounding rooftops. If this goes sideways, I want overwhelming force. Done. The man left. Serena's stomach twisted. You're walking into a trap. It's not the first time. That doesn't make it smart. No, but it's necessary. Kael picked up his coffee again, taking a long drink like he needed the caffeine to think. Viscari wants to see if I'll blink. If I do, every other family will think I'm weak, and weak bosses don't last long. So you're going to risk your life to prove a point. I'm going to end this before it gets worse. The casual way he said it made her furious. You could die. I could. He set down the mug, meeting her eyes. Does that bother you? Of course it bothers me. I don't want anyone to die. That's not what I asked. Serena's throat tightened. She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him she didn't care, that he was just some mobster she'd gotten tangled up with and his survival meant nothing to her. But the words wouldn't come. Yes, she admitted quietly. It bothers me. Something fierce and hungry flashed in Kael's eyes. Then he closed the distance between them, one hand cupping her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'll come back. You don't know that. I do. Because I'm not done with you yet. His mouth was an inch from hers, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips, close enough that all she had to do was lean forward and... Serena stepped back. Don't, she said, voice shaking. Don't make promises you can't keep. Kael's hand dropped, but his eyes stayed locked on her face. I always keep my promises, Serena. Then he left the kitchen, leaving her standing there with cold coffee and a heart that wouldn't slow down. The hours dragged. Serena tried to distract herself. She explored the house, dozens of rooms filled with expensive furniture and heavy silence. She found a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves and leather chairs that smelled like old paper. She found a music room with a grand piano covered in dust. She found a door that wouldn't open, locked from the outside, and decided she didn't want to know what was behind it. By late afternoon, she ended up in the gardens. They were beautiful in a haunting way. Stone pathways winding through flower beds that someone clearly tended with obsessive care. Roses everywhere, red, white, pink, climbing over trellises and spilling across the ground. In the center stood a marble fountain with a weeping angel, water trickling from its hands into a basin below. Serena sat on a bench near the fountain and tried to sort through the chaos in her head. She should be terrified, should be looking for a way out, calling the police, doing something other than sitting in a mobster's garden waiting for him to come back from a meeting that might get him killed. But instead she was worried. Not about herself. About him. You're thinking too hard. Serena jumped, spinning around. A woman stood on the path behind her, late 50s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun, and the kind of face that had once been beautiful and was now striking in a different way. She wore a simple dress and gardening gloves, holding a pair of pruning shears. I'm sorry, Serena said. I didn't realize anyone else was here. I take care of the roses. The woman moved closer, studying Serena with sharp eyes. You must be the girl Kyle brought home. We're not. Serena's face heated. It's not like that. The woman smiled faintly. Of course not. Who are you? Maria. I've worked for the Moretti family since Kyle was a boy. She sat down on the bench beside Serena, setting the pruning shears in her lap. His mother planted these roses. Did he tell you? No. She loved them, spent hours out here every day, even when she was sick. Maria's expression softened. Kyle was 12 when she died. Cancer. By the time they caught it, there was nothing anyone could do. Serena's chest tightened. I'm sorry. He doesn't talk about her. Doesn't talk about much, really. Just buries everything under work and duty and that cold mask he wears. Maria looked at Serena. But he brought you here, to his mother's garden. That means something. It means he's protecting me from people who want to hurt him. It means he cares about you enough to risk showing you who he really is. Maria stood, picking up her shears. The roses need deadheading. You're welcome to help, if you need something to do besides worry. Serena hesitated, then followed. They worked in comfortable silence, Maria showing her which blooms to cut and which to leave. The repetitive motion was soothing, meditative. For a little while, Serena could almost forget where she was and why. Then Maria said, He's a good man underneath all the violence. I'm not sure that's true. I didn't say he was a safe man. I said he was good. Maria snipped off a faded rose, examining the stem. There's a difference. What if I don't want a dangerous man? Then you should leave. Tonight, before he comes back. Before this goes any further. Serena's hand stilled on the roses. Would he let me go? I don't know, Maria admitted. But I think you should decide soon. Because once you're truly part of his world, there's no walking away without consequences. The warning settled like ice in Serena's stomach. Kale left the estate at 7:30, surrounded by 4 cars full of armed men. Serena watched from an upstairs window, her reflection ghostly in the glass as the convoy disappeared through the gates. Then she waited. 8 o'clock came and went. 9. 10. By 11, Serena was pacing the guest room, phone clutched in one hand, even though she had no one to call. Maya would ask too many questions. The police would laugh at her, and Kyle's men had made it clear they answered to him, not her. Midnight, 1 a.m. At 1:30, she heard cars in the driveway. Serena ran downstairs, not caring how desperate it looked, her heart slamming against her ribs. The front door opened. Kyle walked through it. Alive, whole, covered in blood that didn't look like his. Their eyes met across the foyer. Then Serena was moving, closing the distance between them, not thinking, just reacting to the overwhelming relief flooding through her system. She stopped a foot away, breathing hard. Kale stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his expression. You came back, Serena said stupidly. I told you I would. You're covered in blood. Not mine. That doesn't make it better. I know. He took a step closer, and she could smell gunpowder and copper and something darker. I killed him, Biscari. It's done. The words should have horrified her. Instead, all Serena felt was a sick kind of gratitude. Why? She whispered. Because he touched you. Kale's voice was flat, empty, like he'd left some essential part of himself in that warehouse. Because he thought he could use you against me. Because I needed to send a message that anyone who threatens you doesn't get a second chance. Kale, I'm not a good man, Serena. He looked at her with those pale, haunted eyes. I've done things tonight that would make you sick, but I'd do them again if it meant keeping you safe. She should run, should be disgusted, should do literally anything except what she did next. Serena closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him. Kyle went rigid, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to be held. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. I was terrified, she admitted against his shoulder. Of me? For you. His grip tightened. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in a foyer that smelled like death and roses, and Serena finally admitted to herself what she'd been denying since the moment she stepped into his car. She was falling for him, the man who sent her flowers and poetry, the man who killed without hesitation to protect her, the man who was dangerous and damaged and completely, utterly wrong for her in every possible way. When Kyle finally pulled back, His hand stayed on her waist, keeping her close. I need to clean up, he said quietly. Okay. Then I need to tell you something. Something in his voice made her stomach drop. What? Not now. After I shower. He closed his eyes briefly. Just wait for me. Please. Serena nodded even though dread was coiling in her chest. Cale's thumb brushed her hip once, a gesture so tender it hurt. Then he disappeared upstairs. Keats. He found her in the library 40 minutes later, wearing clean clothes and looking human again, except for the shadows in his eyes. Serena sat curled in one of the leather chairs, pretending to read a book she hadn't processed a single word of. Kyle sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I'm engaged, he said. The words hit like a punch. Serena's book slipped from her fingers. What? An arranged marriage, set up by my father before he died, the daughter of Don Vittorio Bellicaro, one of the most powerful families in Europe. His voice was emotionless, reciting facts. The wedding is supposed to happen in 6 months. It's been planned for 3 years. Ice flooded through her veins. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm going to break it. Serena's breath caught. Kyle looked up, meeting her eyes. I'm breaking the engagement. Because of you. Don't. The word came out sharp, desperate. Don't do that. Don't ruin your life because of me. You don't understand. This isn't just a wedding. It's a political alliance. Breaking it means war with the Bellicaro family. It means losing alliances my father spent decades building. It means... Then don't break it, Serena interrupted, standing up. I'm not worth starting a war over. Kyle stood too, moving around the coffee table until he was right in front of her. Yes, you are. I'm not. I'm just some girl you met at a wedding. Someone you've known for 3 weeks. You can't throw away an entire alliance for... I'm in love with you. The world stopped. Serena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? I'm in love with you, Kyle repeated, slower this time. His hands came up to frame her face, forcing her to look at him. I know it's insane. I know it doesn't make sense. But from the moment you walked up to me in that ballroom and refused to be afraid, something changed. And I won't marry someone else when all I think about is you. Tears burned in Serena's eyes. You barely know me. I know you're brave. I know you're smart enough to call me out on my bullshit. I know you don't back down, even when you should. I know the way you look at roses makes me want to plant an entire garden just to see you smile. His thumb brushed away a tear sliding down her cheek. And I know that losing you would be worse than any war the Bellicaro family could start. Kyle? Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm delusional. Tell me to marry the Bellicaro girl and leave you alone. I'll do it if you ask. Serena's heart was breaking and mending and shattering all over again. I can't, she whispered. Can't what? Can't tell you to leave me alone. Can't pretend I don't... Her voice cracked. I'm falling for you too. And I hate it. I hate that you're dangerous and violent and completely wrong for me. I hate that being with you means living in fear. I hate that you make me feel safe and terrified at the same time. Kale's forehead pressed against hers. Then be terrified with me. It's going to destroy us. Probably. Your family will hate me. I don't care. The Bellicaro family will want revenge. Let them try. Serena's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control. This is insane, she breathed. I know. We're going to regret this. Maybe. His lips brushed her temple. But I'd rather regret being with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft or tentative, or any of the things a first kiss should be. It was desperate and consuming and tasted like blood and roses, and crossing a line neither of them could uncross. Serena kissed him back like drowning, like falling, like finally surrendering to something she'd been fighting since the moment he'd smiled at her in a ballroom full of dangerous men. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle's eyes were dark with want and something more terrifying, certainty. Stay with me tonight, he said. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. Serena knew what he was really asking, knew that if she said yes, everything would change. There would be no going back to her normal life, her safe apartment, her ordinary existence, where the most dangerous thing she dealt with was drunk wedding guests. But she'd stopped wanting ordinary the moment Kael Moretti looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth fighting for. Okay, she whispered. Kael's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. Then he led her upstairs, through hallways lined with portraits of dead men, to his bedroom at the end of the hall. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and Serena Vale, the girl who'd spent her whole life playing it safe, surrendered completely to the most dangerous man she'd ever met. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Kael's arm draped across her waist. For a moment, Serena lay perfectly still, taking inventory. Sore muscles, kiss-bruised lips, the weight of consequences she couldn't quite name pressing against her chest. Then Kael stirred beside her, pulling her closer against his chest, and none of it mattered. "Morning?" he murmured against her shoulder. "Morning?" His hand traced lazy patterns on her hip. "Regret it yet? Ask me in an hour." She felt him smile against her skin. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped around each other, pretending the world outside didn't exist. Then Kael's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, cursing, he reached over and grabbed it. Serena watched his expression change as he read whatever message had come through, watched the softness disappear, replaced by something cold and lethal. "What is it?" she asked. Kael's jaw tightened. "The Bellicaro family knows." "Knows what?" "About you. About me breaking the engagement." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Don Vittorio is demanding a meeting. Today." Ice flooded Serena's veins. "What does that mean?" "It means war just became a real possibility." Kael looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that might have been fear in his eyes. "It means I dragged you into something that could get you killed. Then we end it. Now, before it's too late." His voice was flat, final. "The moment I chose you over his daughter, I made you a target, and there's no taking that back." Serena's breath came short and fast. "What do we do?" Kael stood, already moving toward his closet, pulling out clothes with practiced efficiency. "You stay here, behind walls and guards, where it's safe. And you?" "I go meet Don Vittorio, and I pray he's more interested in money than bloodshed." "Kael, He turned, crossing back to the bed in 3 strides, cupping her face in both hands. "I will fix this," he said fiercely. "I will keep you safe. I promise." Then he kissed her hard and fast like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled away, Serena caught his wrist. "Come back," she said, "always." But as she watched him leave, dressing quickly in a suit that made him look every inch the mob boss he was, Serena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just lost something she hadn't realized she was holding on to. The illusion that love could exist without consequences. The day stretched endlessly. Serena tried to distract herself, helped Maria with the roses, read books in the library, paced the hallways until her feet hurt. But all she could think about was Kael walking into a meeting with a man who had every reason to want him dead. By the time the sun started setting, she was standing at the front windows watching the driveway like she could will him to appear. The gates opened, but it wasn't Kael's Mercedes. It was a convoy, 6 black SUVs, moving fast, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Serena's heart stopped. The front door burst open behind her. One of Kael's men, she didn't know his name, grabbed her arm. "We need to move. Now!" "What's happening?" "Bellicaro soldiers, they're coming for you." "Where's Kael?" "Still at the meeting. He doesn't know yet." The man was already dragging her toward the back of the house. "We have orders to get you out if this happens. There's a car waiting." Gunfire erupted outside. The windows shattered. Serena hit the floor, hands over her head, ears ringing. More gunfire, shouting, the sound of men dying. Then silence. Footsteps on marble, slow, measured. A man appeared in the doorway. Expensive suit, salt and pepper hair, eyes like winter. Don Vittorio Bellicaro. He looked at Serena the way someone might look at an insect they were deciding whether to crush. "So," he said softly, "you're the girl worth starting a war over." Serena couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stare at the man who held her life in his hands. Don Vittorio smiled. It was the coldest smile she'd ever seen. "Let's see if Kael Moretti thinks you're worth dying for, too." Don Vittorio Bellicaro didn't look like a man who'd just ordered an assault on a fortified estate. He looked like someone's grandfather, with his silver hair and expensive suit and the kind of calm that came from 4 decades of getting exactly what he wanted through violence disguised as civility. Serena pushed herself off the floor, glass shards clinging to her clothes, ears still ringing from gunfire. Blood streaked across the marble. Kael's man, the one who'd tried to get her out, lay crumpled near the doorway with half his head missing. She didn't scream, couldn't. Her voice had locked somewhere in her throat alongside her ability to process that this was real, that she was about to die in a stranger's foyer surrounded by roses and dead men. "Stand up properly," Don Vittorio said, his accent thick with old country vowels. "Let me look at you." Serena's legs shook as she straightened. 2 of Don Vittorio's soldiers flanked him, younger men with dead eyes and assault rifles held casually, like they'd done this 100 times before. The old man circled her slowly, studying her the way someone might examine livestock at auction. Pretty enough, I suppose. Not exceptional. Certainly not worth what Kael is throwing away. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cloying. "Tell me, girl, what did you do to make him so stupid?" "I didn't do anything." Serena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever asks. But here we are anyway." Don Vittorio's eyes, pale blue, almost colorless, tracked across her face with clinical detachment. "My daughter is beautiful, educated, bred specifically to stand beside a man like Kael Moretti, and he chose you instead. A nobody, a coordinator who couldn't afford the dress she wore to serve my champagne." The contempt in his voice was almost worse than the guns. "So I ask you again." He stepped closer and Serena's spine hit the wall behind her. "What did you do?" "I spoke Sicilian." The words came out before she could stop them. "I called him a coward in front of his men, and he liked it." Silence. Then Don Vittorio laughed, a dry, humorless sound like wind through dead leaves. "Of course he did. Arrogant boy. Thinks he can do whatever he wants because his father built an empire." The laughter died. His father knew better. Antonio Moretti understood that power requires sacrifice, that marriage isn't about love, it's about legacy. Then why does it matter if Kael breaks it off? Because my family doesn't get humiliated by a 32-year-old boy who thinks with his cock instead of his head. Don Vittorio's hand shot out, gripping Serena's jaw hard enough to bruise. Because I spent 3 years negotiating this alliance. Because my daughter has been preparing to become his wife since she was 20 years old. Because I gave my word, and in my world, that means something. Serena tried to pull away. His grip tightened. "You're going to help me send a message," he said softly. "I won't." "You don't have a choice." He released her face, stepping back. "Take her to the car, carefully. I want her intact when Kael sees what happens to girls who destroy alliances." The soldiers moved forward. Serena bolted. She made it 3 steps before one of them caught her around the waist, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. She screamed, kicking, clawing at his arms, but he just adjusted his grip and kept walking. "Gag her," Don Vittorio said. "The noise is irritating." Rough hands shoved fabric into Serena's mouth. She gagged, still fighting, but there were too many of them, and they were too strong. And within seconds she was being hauled toward the shattered windows and the darkness beyond. The last thing she saw before they dragged her outside was Maria standing in the hallway with blood on her gardening gloves, watching with the kind of resigned horror that said she'd seen this before. Then the night swallowed her whole. They threw Serena into the back of an SUV that smelled like leather and gun oil. One soldier climbed in beside her, gun resting casually across his lap. The gag cut into the corners of her mouth. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back tight enough that her fingers were already going numb. Don Vittorio slid into the front passenger seat as the convoy pulled away from the estate, leaving behind shattered glass and corpses and the roses Kael's mother had planted. "Where are we taking her?" the driver asked. "The warehouse, the one Moretti used for Viscari." Don Vittorio lit a cigarette, cracking the window. "I want him to see exactly where this ends. Poetic, don't you think?" Serena's stomach lurched. The soldier beside her was scrolling through his phone, bored, like kidnapping was just another Tuesday. She tried to think, tried to find some angle, some way out of this that didn't end with her blood on concrete. But her mind kept circling back to the same terrible truth. Kael didn't know where she was. Didn't know Don Vittorio had come for her. Wouldn't know until it was too late. They drove for 20 minutes through streets Serena didn't recognize. The warehouse district, industrial, empty after dark. The kind of place where screams wouldn't carry. The convoy stopped outside a building that looked abandoned. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. Don Vittorio climbed out first, stretching like he'd just arrived at a vacation home instead of a torture site. "Bring her inside," he said, "and someone call Moretti. Tell him if he wants his whore back alive, he'll come alone. No soldiers, no backup, just him." They dragged Serena out of the SUV and through a side door that opened into cavernous darkness. Someone hit the lights, fluorescence flickering to life overhead, revealing a space that had been cleared of everything except a single metal chair bolted to the floor. Serena's heart stopped. The floor around the chair was stained dark, old blood, lots of it. "Sit her down," Don Vittorio ordered. They forced her into the chair. More zip ties, ankles to the chair legs, torso to the backrest. So tight she could barely breathe. The soldier removed her gag. Serena gasped, coughing, throat raw. Don Vittorio pulled up a folding chair and sat down across from her, crossing one leg over the other like they were having coffee. "Do you know what happened in this room?" he asked conversationally. Serena shook her head. "Salvatore Viscari died here 3 days ago. Cale Moretti tortured him for information, then put a bullet in his brain." Don Vittorio smiled. "I thought it was fitting. The place where Kyle killed for you becomes the place where you die because of him. He'll kill you for this. Perhaps. But first he'll suffer, and suffering is the point." The old man leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm going to give you a choice, Serena Vale, a gift, really, though you won't see it that way." "What choice?" "You can convince Kyle to honor his engagement to my daughter. You can tell him you don't love him, that you made a mistake, that you want nothing to do with his world. You can break his heart so thoroughly that he walks away from you and marries Isabella the way he was supposed to." Don Vittorio's expression never changed. "Or you can refuse, and I'll make him watch while I take you apart piece by piece until there's nothing left worth saving." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're insane," Serena whispered. "I'm practical. Cale is young, emotional. He'll recover from heartbreak. But if I kill you in front of him, he'll start a war that destroys both our families, and I'd rather avoid that if possible." He stood, brushing invisible lint from his suit. "So, what will it be?" Serena's mind raced. If she agreed, she'd lose Kyle but survive. If she refused, she'd die, and Cale would carry that for the rest of his life. Either way, Don Vittorio won. "I need to think," she said. "You have until Kyle arrives. I'd estimate 30 minutes. Don Vittorio checked his watch. "Use them wisely." He walked toward the far end of the warehouse, leaving Serena alone with her thoughts, and the soldiers guarding the exits. Bate. She didn't have 30 minutes. She had 18. Serena knew because she'd been counting seconds in her head, trying to stay calm, trying to think of something, anything, that wasn't surrender or death. Then she heard the sound of an engine outside. Car doors slamming, footsteps. The warehouse door opened. Kyle walked in. Alone. Serena's heart shattered and mended and shattered again at the sight of him. He'd changed clothes since that morning. Black pants, black shirt, no jacket. Like he'd dressed for war and then left the armor behind. His pale eyes swept the warehouse, cataloging exits and threats, before landing on her. Something in his expression broke. "Serena." Her name came out ragged. Don Vittorio appeared from the shadows, clapping slowly. "Punctual. I appreciate that." Cale's attention snapped to the old man. "Let her go." "Eventually. First we talk." "There's nothing to talk about." Cale's voice was flat, empty. "You want me to honor the engagement. Fine. I'll marry your daughter. Just let Serena go." "No." Don Vittorio's smile was cold. "That's not how this works. You don't get to throw away 3 years of negotiation, humiliate my family, and then buy your way out with a simple fine. What do you want?" "I want you to understand consequences." The old man gestured toward Serena. "I want you to see what happens when you put desire above duty. I want you broken, Cale, remade into the kind of man your father would have been proud of." Cale took a step forward. Every gun in the warehouse tracked his movement. "Touch her and I'll burn your entire family to ash. You'll try, but you're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Your men are dead or scattered. Your estate is compromised. Your leverage is gone. Don Vittorio pulled a pistol from his jacket. Small, silver, almost delicate. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get on your knees and beg me for her life. You're going to promise to marry Isabella within the month. And you're going to agree to pay me $10 million for the inconvenience of having to clean up your mess. Done. Cale didn't hesitate. All of it. Just let her go. Cale, don't, Serena started. Shut up, Cale snapped, still looking at Don Vittorio. You have my word. I'll do everything you're asking. Just don't hurt her. Don Vittorio considered this. Get on your knees. Cale dropped without hesitation. The sight of it, Cale Moretti, the most dangerous man she'd ever met, kneeling in a pool of old blood, made Serena want to scream. Beg, Don Vittorio ordered. Please, Cale's voice cracked. Please let her go. I'll give you anything. Money, territory, my fucking life if you want it. Just don't hurt her. Serena was crying now, silently, tears streaming down her face. Don Vittorio walked closer, pressing the gun against Cale's forehead. This is what love gets you, he said softly. On your knees, powerless, pathetic. Then he pulled the trigger. The click echoed through the warehouse. Empty chamber. Cale didn't flinch. Don Vittorio laughed, lowering the gun. Did you really think I'd kill you? You're worth more to me alive and married to my daughter than dead. He tucked the pistol away. But your little whore here? She's just a loose end. He turned toward Serena. No. Cale surged to his feet. Gunfire erupted. Not from Don Vittorio. From outside. The warehouse windows shattered. Smoke canisters hit the floor, hissing, filling the space with choking gray clouds. Serena couldn't see, couldn't breathe, could only hear shouting and gunshots and chaos. Someone cut her zip ties. Hands grabbed her. Not rough. Familiar. I've got you, Cale's voice in her ear. Hold on to me. Serena wrapped her arms around his neck as he lifted her, moving fast through the smoke. More gunfire, bodies hitting the ground, the sound of men dying. Then cold air on her face. They were outside. Cale set her down behind an SUV, not Don Vittorio's, she realized. Different. The Moretti crest on the door. Stay down, he ordered. You said you'd come alone. I lied. Cale's smile was vicious. Did you really think I'd walk into a trap without backup? He disappeared back into the smoke. Serena pressed herself against the SUV, shaking, trying to process what was happening. The gunfight inside the warehouse was brutal, short, efficient. Within 2 minutes, the shooting stopped. Then Cale walked out, covered in blood again, dragging Don Vittorio by the collar. The old man was still alive. Barely. Blood poured from a gunshot wound in his shoulder. Cale threw him on the ground in front of Serena. Look at him, Cale said, voice cold as winter. Look at the man who thought he could take you from me. Don Vittorio coughed, red bubbles forming at his lips. You started a war, boy. Good. Cale crouched down, grabbing the old man's jaw. I want a war. I want everyone to know what happens when they threaten what's mine. Your father would be ashamed. Cale slammed Don Vittorio's head against the pavement. Once, twice. The old man went limp, not dead, but close. Get him medical attention, Cale told one of his men. I want him alive long enough to tell his family exactly what happened here. I want them to know I could have killed him, but chose mercy. And I want them to know that mercy has a price. The soldier nodded, dragging Don Vittorio away. Cale turned back to Serena, his expression shifting from lethal to devastated in seconds. Did he hurt you? She shook her head, throat too tight for words. Cale pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. You saved me, Serena whispered against his shoulder. Barely. His voice broke. If I'd been 5 minutes later, but you weren't. They stood like that, holding each other in a parking lot full of blood and bullet casings, while around them Cale's men secured the perimeter and loaded bodies into vehicles. Finally, Cale pulled back, hands framing her face. This is my life, he said. This violence, this constant threat. If you stay with me, it will never be safe. There will always be someone trying to use you against me. Always danger. Always fear. Serena's hands covered his. I know. And you still want this? She should say no. Should run while she still could. back to her ordinary life where the biggest danger was a drunk groomsman getting handsy. But she looked at Kyle, blood-stained and beautiful and completely, utterly hers, and couldn't imagine choosing anything else. "Yes," she said. Something fierce and desperate flashed in his eyes. Then he kissed her, hard and claiming, tasting like smoke and copper and survival. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "The engagement is over," he said. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care who I have to fight. You're mine, and I'm not giving you up for anyone. The Bellicaro family can go to hell." His jaw tightened. "I'll pay whatever blood price they demand, but I'm done pretending I can marry someone else when all I want is you." Serena's chest ached. What if they don't accept money? What if they want war? Then we go to war. Kale's pale eyes met hers, unflinching, and we win.
Bisis.
The drive back to the estate took longer than it should have because Kyle kept making stops, switching vehicles, doubling back, taking side roads that avoided main intersections. Standard evasion tactics, he explained, in case anyone was tracking them. Serena sat in the back seat with her head on his shoulder, too exhausted to process anything beyond the fact that she was alive and Kyle was beside her. When they finally pulled through the gates, dawn was breaking over the rose gardens. The estate looked like a war zone, shattered windows, bullet holes in the walls, blood on the marble steps. Men in hazmat suits were already cleaning, hauling away bodies, erasing evidence with practiced efficiency. Maria stood near the fountain, still wearing her blood-stained gardening gloves. She looked at Serena with something that might have been relief, or pity, maybe both. Kyle led Serena inside, past the cleanup crews and the guards posting around every entrance, up the stairs to his bedroom. He locked the door behind them. Then he just stood there, staring at her like he was trying to memorize every detail. "What?" Serena asked. "I almost lost you." His voice was raw. "I almost walked into that warehouse and found you dead because I was too arrogant to see Don Vittorio wouldn't negotiate in good faith." "But you didn't. I'm here. I'm okay. This time." He crossed the room, hands gentle as he cupped her face. "Next time I might not be fast enough. Next time—" "Stop." Serena covered his hands with hers. "We can't live in next time. We can only live in now. Now is terrifying. I know." She pulled him closer until there was no space between them. "But I'm not going anywhere." "You should." "Probably." She smiled, sad and tired and certain. "But I won't." Kale kissed her then. Slower this time, deeper, like he was trying to convince himself she was real. They undressed each other carefully, cataloging bruises and cuts and evidence of the night they'd barely survived. Then they fell into bed together, wrapped around each other, holding on like letting go meant drowning. "I love you," Kale whispered against her hair. "I don't know when it happened or how to stop. But I love you, Serena, more than I've ever loved anything." Serena's throat tightened. "I love you too. Even though I'm destroying your life?" "You didn't destroy it. You just made it more complicated." She tilted her head back to look at him. "And terrifying, and occasionally traumatizing, but also what? Also the first time I've ever felt like I matter." Her voice cracked. "Like someone would burn the world down to keep me safe." Kyle's arms tightened around her. "I would. I will. I know." They lay together in the growing light, listening to the sounds of the estate being fortified around them. Men shouting orders, vehicles arriving, the rhythmic hammer of someone boarding up windows, preparing for war, because that's what was coming. Serena knew it. Kyle knew it. The moment he'd chosen her over the alliance, he'd painted a target on both their backs that wouldn't disappear just because Don Vittorio had survived. But for now, in this moment, wrapped in Kyle's arms with dawn turning the sky pink beyond the broken windows, she let herself believe they could survive anything, even if it was a lie. She woke to voices downstairs, angry voices. Serena sat up, disoriented, finding herself alone in Kyle's bed. The clock on the nightstand read 2:47 p.m. She'd slept for 8 hours. The voices got louder. She pulled on the clothes someone had left folded on a chair, jeans and a sweater that weren't hers but fit well enough, and crept to the bedroom door. "Insane if you think the Bellicaro family will let this slide," a man was saying. Deep voice. Authority. You put a bullet in Don Vittorio and kidnapped his men. There's no walking that back. I don't want to walk it back. Kael's voice, cold and final. I want them to understand the cost of threatening her. Her, one girl, against an alliance that's kept the East Coast stable for 3 years. She's not just one girl, she's mine. That's the problem, Kael. You're thinking with your cock instead of a crash. Something breaking. Finish that sentence and I'll put you through the fucking window. Silence. Then the other voice again, quieter. We're trying to help you, but you're making it impossible. Serena opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The voices were coming from Kael's study, a room she'd never been in. She moved closer, staying out of sight. Through the half-open door, she could see Kael standing behind a desk, hands braced on the surface like he was holding himself upright through force of will. Across from him stood 5 men in suits, all older, all watching Kael with varying degrees of concern and frustration. His capos, his inner circle. The Bellicaro family will demand restitution, one of them said. Older. Gray hair. The same man from the restaurant who'd protested when Kael dismissed everyone for Serena. Blood or money, probably both. Then they can have money. How much money are you willing to lose over this girl? All of it. Kael straightened. Every dollar, every property, every investment. I don't care. You should care. Your father built this empire. My father is dead. Kael's voice cut like a blade. And I'm not him. I'm not marrying a woman I don't love to preserve an alliance I never wanted. If that makes me weak in your eyes, then find a new boss. The men exchanged glances. We're not questioning your leadership, another one said carefully. We're questioning your judgment. This girl, Serena, she's a civilian. She doesn't understand our world. And now you've put her at the center of a conflict that could get hundreds of people killed. I know what I've done. Do you? Because from where we're standing, it looks like you've thrown away everything for someone you've known for 3 weeks. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Get out. Kael, I said get out, all of you. I'll call you when I have a plan. The men filed out, faces grim. Serena pressed herself against the wall as they passed, but one of them saw her. The gray-haired one. He stopped, looking at her with something between pity and contempt. I hope you're worth it, he said quietly. Then he left. Serena waited until the front door closed before stepping into the study. Kael was staring out the window, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders tight with tension. How much did you hear? He asked without turning around. Enough. Then you know they think I'm making a mistake. Are you? He turned to face her. I don't know anymore. The honesty of it hurt worse than any lie. Serena crossed the room until she stood in front of him. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me I'm not insane. That choosing you over an alliance that's kept peace for 3 years isn't the stupidest thing I've ever done. I can't tell you that. Why not? Because I don't know if it's true. She looked up at him, throat tight. Maybe you are making a mistake. Maybe I am just some girl you're obsessing over because I was the first person to challenge you. Maybe in 6 months you'll wake up and realize you destroyed everything for someone who wasn't worth it. Serena, but I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone, and the thought of losing you makes me feel like I'm drowning. Her voice cracked. So if you're making a mistake, I'm making it with you. Kael pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe you can't. There has to be a way. Some compromise that keeps everyone alive. What if there isn't? He didn't answer. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the sun moved across the sky and the estate hummed with preparations for a war neither of them wanted, but both knew was coming. Finally, Kael pulled back. There's one option, he said slowly. I don't like it, but it might work. What option? I meet with the Bellicaro family. All of them. Don Vittorio, his sons, his capos. I bring you with me. I make it clear that you're not a weakness they can exploit. You're part of my organization now, under my protection. Untouchable. Serena's stomach dropped. They'll kill us both. Maybe, or maybe they'll respect the boldness of it. Maybe showing them I'm willing to bring you into the lion's den proves you're more than just some girl I'm fucking. That's insane. It's the only play I have left. His hands framed her face. But I won't do it without you. If you say no, we find another way, even if it means war. Serena thought about Don Vittorio's cold eyes, the warehouse, the chair bolted to the floor, the stains that wouldn't wash out. She thought about Kael on his knees, begging for her life. She thought about living the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next attack, the next kidnapping, the next moment when violence came crashing through the door. When? She asked. Tomorrow night, neutral ground. A restaurant the Bellicaro family owns. Public enough that they won't try anything obvious. And if they don't accept your offer? Then we leave, together, and we run until I can regroup and fight back. Serena's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm terrified. Me too. But you don't look scared. I've had more practice hiding it. He kissed her forehead. Whatever happens, we face it together. I promise. Serena wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love and boldness and sheer stubborn will could be enough to survive what was coming. But standing in Kael's study, wrapped in his arms while outside men prepared for war, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to walk into something neither of them would walk out of. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Kael's men turned the estate into a fortress. Reinforced doors, additional guards, surveillance cameras covering every angle. Maria disappeared, whether voluntarily or by order, Serena didn't know. The roses in the garden went untended. Kael drilled Serena on what to expect, how to stand, how to speak, how to look dangerous men in the eye without flinching. Don't apologize, he told her for the 10th time. Don't show weakness. Don't give them any reason to think you're afraid. I am afraid. I know, but they can't see it. She practiced in the mirror, lifting her chin, setting her shoulders, staring into her own eyes until the fear became something else, not confidence, determination. By the time the sun set on the following day, Serena had transformed. Black dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked older, harder, like someone who belonged in Kael's world instead of someone pretending to survive it. Kael appeared in the doorway of the guest room, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look every inch the mob boss he was. His eyes swept over her, something dark and possessive flickering in their depths. You look dangerous, he said. Good. He crossed the room, fingers trailing down her arm. Last chance to back out. I'm not backing out. Serena, I love you. She turned to face him fully. And I'm not letting you walk into that room alone, so stop trying to give me an exit. Kael's jaw tightened. Then he pulled her close, kissing her hard enough to bruise. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. Whatever happens in there, he said, don't let them see you break. Don't give them satisfaction. Can you do that? Yes. Promise me. I promise. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Then let's go face the wolves. They walked downstairs together, past guards who watched them leave with the kind of grim expressions that said they didn't expect both of them to come back. The Mercedes was waiting. Kael opened the door for her and Serena climbed in, heart hammering against her ribs. He slid in beside her, and the car pulled through the gates. Toward the city. Toward the Bellicaro family. Toward whatever ending waited for them in a restaurant full of men who wanted them dead. Serena watched the lights blur past the window and tried not to think about the fact that this might be the last car ride she ever took. Tried not to think about the chair bolted to the floor. Tried not to think about Don Vittorio's smile. Instead, she gripped Kael's hand and told herself that love was worth fighting for, even if the fight killed them both. The restaurant was called Bellissimo, which Serena thought was either deeply ironic or deliberately mocking. Nothing about walking into a building owned by the family that wanted her dead felt beautiful. The exterior was understated, red brick, a simple awning, valet parking that looked more appropriate for a neighborhood bistro than a mob stronghold. But Serena could see the tells. The security cameras angled to cover every approach, the men in suits loitering near the entrance with bulges under their jackets, the way normal customers were being turned away with polite apologies about a private event. Kael's hand tightened on hers as they approached. Remember, he murmured, eyes up, shoulders back, you belong here. Serena lifted her chin and walked through the door like she owned the place. The interior was dimly lit, all dark wood and leather booths and the smell of expensive wine. Most of the tables were empty. At the back of the restaurant, a private dining room glowed with warm light. That's where the wolves were waiting. Two of Don Vittorio's men flanked the entrance. They didn't move to stop Kael and Serena, just watched them approach with the kind of dead-eyed stare that said they'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Kael nodded once. The men stepped aside. The dining room was larger than Serena expected. A table set for 12 dominated the center, covered in white linen and crystal glasses that caught the chandelier light. 8 men sat around it, all wearing suits that cost more than Serena's yearly rent. At the head of the table sat Don Vittorio. His left arm was in a sling, shoulder bandaged beneath his jacket, the bullet wound from the warehouse. His face was pale, drawn with pain, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass. Those eyes locked onto Serena with pure hatred. "Kael Moretti," Don Vittorio said, his accent thicker than Serena remembered. "You have balls, I'll give you that. Walking in here after what you did. You invited me." Kael's voice was calm, controlled. He pulled out a chair for Serena at the opposite end of the table from Don Vittorio. She sat, and Kael took the seat beside her. "I'm here to negotiate." "Negotiate." Don Vittorio laughed, a wet sound that turned into a cough. He pressed a handkerchief to his mouth, and when he pulled it away, there were flecks of blood on the white fabric. "You put a bullet in my shoulder. You killed 6 of my men. You humiliated my family in front of the entire East Coast. And you think there's something to negotiate? I think neither of us wants a war that leaves both families bleeding." "Perhaps I do." Don Vittorio set down the handkerchief carefully. "Perhaps watching your empire burn is worth the cost." One of the other men at the table leaned forward, younger than Don Vittorio, with the same pale eyes. His son, Serena realized. "Father, let's hear what he has to say." "Why? So he can insult us further by pretending his whore is worth our time?" Kael's entire body went rigid. Serena put her hand on his knee under the table. "A warning. Don't." "Serena Vale is not a whore," Kael said, each word precise as a blade. "She's under my protection, part of my organization. And if you want to discuss terms, you'll speak about her with respect." "Respect." Don Vittorio spat the word. "You break your engagement to my daughter, a woman of breeding and education and family, for some coordinator who serves drinks at weddings, and you demand I show her respect?" "Yes." The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Don Vittorio's son, Marco, Serena remembered from Kael's briefing, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on practical matters. Restitution, terms, how to move forward without further bloodshed. There's only one term that matters." Don Vittorio's gaze never left Kael. "You marry Isabella, you honor the alliance, and you send your little plaything away with enough money to disappear forever. Do that, and we'll consider this matter settled." "No," Kael said. "Then you choose war." "I choose Serena." Kael's hand found hers on the table, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone. "I'll pay you $10 million for breaking the engagement. I'll cede the territory in Brooklyn you've been trying to acquire. I'll publicly acknowledge that the fault was mine and apologize to your daughter. But I won't give up Serena, and I won't marry Isabella." Silence. Then Don Vittorio stood, the movement clearly painful. His men rose with him. "Then you're a fool," the old man said. "And fools don't last long in our world." He turned to leave. "Wait." Serena's voice cut through the room. Every head turned toward her. Kael's grip on her hand tightened in warning, but she ignored it. "Don Vittorio," she said, standing. Her legs wanted to shake. She didn't let them. "You're right. I'm nobody. I serve drinks at weddings. I don't have family connections or breeding or any of the things your daughter has, but I do have something she doesn't." "And what's that, girl?" Serena looked him in the eye. "Kael's heart, completely, irrevocably, in a way he would never give your daughter no matter how long you forced him to stand beside her." Don Vittorio's expression darkened. "Love is not currency in our world." "Isn't it?" Serena took a step forward, and Kael rose beside her, ready to intervene. "Your men die for you because they love you. Your family stays loyal because they love each other. Everything you've built is held together by love disguised as duty and honor. So don't tell me it's not currency. It's the only currency that matters." "Pretty speech." Don Vittorio's hand drifted toward his jacket. "It changes nothing. It should. Because Kael is offering you money and territory and public acknowledgement of fault. But what he's not telling you is that if you refuse, he won't just fight you. He'll destroy you. Every business you own, every alliance you've built, every dollar you've hidden in offshore accounts. He'll burn it all and salt the earth behind him because that's what men do when you threaten what they love. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Serena's voice didn't waver. You can take his offer and walk away whole, or you can refuse and watch everything you've built crumble while he tears through your organization like a wildfire. Your choice. The room was so quiet Serena could hear her own heartbeat. Then Don Vittorio smiled. It was the coldest, most terrifying smile she'd ever seen. Marco, he said quietly, kill her. Everything happened at once. Marco reached for the gun at his hip. Cale moved faster, drawing from under his jacket, putting himself between Serena and the threat. Gunfire erupted. Serena hit the floor, hands over her head, ears ringing. Glass shattered. Men shouted. Someone screamed. Then Kyle was dragging her toward the back of the dining room, toward a service exit she hadn't noticed before. More gunfire. Bullets splintering wood. The acrid smell of gunpowder. They burst through the exit into a narrow hallway. Kitchen sounds ahead. Cale pulled her toward a loading dock door, shoulder slamming into the crash bar. Outside, night air hit her face like a slap. The alley behind the restaurant was empty except for dumpsters and delivery crates. Kyle's Mercedes screeched around the corner, driven by one of his men. The door flew open. Get in! The loading dock door exploded outward behind them. Don Vittorio's men poured into the alley, weapons drawn. Cale shoved Serena toward the car, turning to fire back. One of the attackers went down, then another. But there were too many. A bullet caught Kyle in the side. He went down hard, gasping. No! Serena scrambled toward him. Get in the fucking car! Cale gritted out, blood already soaking through his shirt. Not without you! She grabbed his arm, trying to haul him up. He was too heavy, too hurt. She pulled anyway, screaming for help, tears streaming down her face. Cale's driver was out of the car, laying down, covering fire. Another of Kael's men appeared from nowhere, grabbing Kael's other arm. Together they hauled him into the back seat. Serena dove in after him, and the car was moving before the door even closed, tires screaming, bullets punching through the rear window. Kael collapsed against her, breathing in short, sharp gasps. How bad? The driver shouted. Serena pressed her hands against the wound in Kael's side. Blood poured between her fingers, hot and slick. Too much blood. Bad, she said, voice breaking. It's bad. Hospital. No hospitals, Kael gasped. They'll be watching. Go to the estate. Call Dr. Chen. Tell him I'm cashing in every favor he owes me. The driver nodded, yanking the wheel hard right. Serena kept pressure on the wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. Kael's face was gray, his eyes unfocused. Stay with me, she begged. Kael, please. Stay with me. His hand found hers, weak and trembling. I'm sorry. Don't you dare apologize. Don't you dare. Should have protected you better. You did protect me. You took a bullet for me. Now shut up and conserve your strength. His laugh turned into a cough. More blood. Serena bit down on a sob and pressed harder on the wound, willing her hands to stop shaking, willing him to survive through sheer force of will. The drive to the estate took 20 minutes. It felt like hours. By the time they pulled through the gates, Kael was barely conscious. His men hauled him out of the car and into the house, up the stairs to his bedroom where a man in his 60s, Dr. Chen, Serena assumed, was already setting up medical equipment on the dresser. Gunshot wound, one of Kael's men said. Right side, through and through. Dr. Chen nodded, already moving to examine the injury. Everyone out except one person to assist. I'm staying, Serena said. The doctor looked at her blood-soaked hands and didn't argue. The next hour was a nightmare. Dr. Chen worked with calm efficiency, cutting away Kael's shirt, cleaning the wound, probing for damage. Kael drifted in and out of consciousness, gasping when the pain got too bad, going worryingly silent when it didn't. Serena held his hand and tried not to think about what would happen if he died. The bullet went through clean, Dr. Chen said finally. Missed the kidney, missed major vessels. He's lucky. He doesn't look lucky, Serena said. Lucky is relative. The doctor started stitching. He'll survive, but he needs rest, no stress, no physical activity, and absolutely no more gunfights for at least 6 weeks. I'll tell him that when he wakes up. Tell me what? Serena's head snapped down. Kael's eyes were open, hazy with pain, but focused on her face. That you're on bed rest for 6 weeks, she said. Like hell. Doctor's orders. The doctor doesn't run my organization. The doctor is the only reason you're not bleeding out on your expensive sheets, Dr. Chen said mildly. So I'd suggest listening to him. Kyle tried to sit up. Pain lanced across his face, and he fell back with a curse. Or don't, the doctor added, and tear your stitches. Your choice. Serena squeezed Kyle's hand. Please, just rest. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, closing his eyes. Dr. Chen finished the stitching, bandaged the wound, and left IV antibiotics with instructions for administration. By the time he packed up his equipment, it was past midnight. Call me if his fever spikes above 102 or if the wound shows signs of infection, he said to Serena. Otherwise, I'll check on him in 48 hours. Thank you. The doctor paused at the door. For what it's worth, I've known Kyle since he was a boy. His father was my patient for years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Then he left. Serena pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down, still holding Kyle's hand. She should clean up, should change out of her blood-stained dress, should do something other than sit here watching him breathe. But she couldn't make herself move, couldn't make herself let go. Outside, she could hear Kyle's men fortifying the estate, shouted orders, vehicles arriving, the sound of weapons being distributed, preparing for the retaliation that would come, because they'd failed. The negotiation had turned into a bloodbath. Don Vittorio would never accept peace now. The war Kyle had tried to avoid was coming, whether they wanted it or not. Serena leaned forward, resting her forehead against Kyle's hand. I'm so sorry, she whispered. This is all my fault. Stop. She looked up. Kyle's eyes were open again, clearer than before. It's not your fault, he said. It's mine. I knew what I was risking, knew what choosing you would cost, and I'd do it again. Even now, after you got shot, especially now. His thumb moved against her knuckles. Because you're still here, still alive, still mine. Serena's throat tightened. What are we going to do? We're going to survive, like Kyle's voice was rough with pain and determination. And then we're going to end this. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He always said that, always sounded certain even when he had no reason to be. Serena wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love and stubbornness and sheer force of will could be enough to survive what was coming. But sitting in a bedroom that smelled like blood and antiseptic, watching the man she loved struggle to breathe through pain he'd taken for her, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Kyle slept fitfully for the next 12 hours, waking periodically in pain or confusion. Serena stayed beside him the entire time, administering medication when Dr. Chen's instructions said to, wiping sweat from his forehead when fever made him restless, holding his hand when nightmares made him call out. By morning, the fever had broken. Kyle woke clear-headed and immediately tried to get out of bed. Absolutely not, Serena said, pushing him back down. You heard the doctor. I need to talk to my men, need to assess damage, reinforce positions. Your men are handling it. You need to heal. Serena, no. She crossed her arms. You took a bullet for me. The least you can do is let me take care of you while you recover. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then his expression softened. You're terrifying when you're bossy. Good. Someone needs to keep you in line. He reached for her hand, pulling her down to sit on the edge of the bed. Come here. She went, carefully avoiding his injured side. Kale's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I love you. I love you too. Even though I got us into this mess? You didn't get us into anything. We walked into it together. She leaned into his touch. And we'll walk out of it together too. You sound sure. One of us has to be. Kyle pulled her closer, kissing her softly. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. They're going to come for us, he said quietly. Don Vittorio, his sons, the entire Belicaro organization. They're going to hit us with everything they have. I know. We might not survive it. I know that too. And you're still staying. Serena pulled back to look at him. Where else would I go? Somewhere safe, somewhere far away from this. I could arrange it. New identity, money, protection in a city where the Belicaro family has no reach. No. Serena, I said no. Her voice was firm. I'm not running. I'm not leaving you to fight this alone. We're in this together, remember? Kale's expression was torn between gratitude and grief. I don't want you to die because of me. And I don't want you to die because of me. So I guess we both need to survive. He laughed, wincing at the pain it caused. That's simple, huh? That's simple. Kale pulled her back down, kissing her harder this time, desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, "There is one option. One last play before this turns into all-out war." What option? The other families, the ones who've stayed neutral. If I can convince them that the Bellicaro family is becoming a threat to everyone, not just us, they might intervene, force a negotiation. Would they do that? Depends on how I frame it. If I can make Don Vittorio look unstable, dangerous, willing to start wars over personal grudges instead of business sense, maybe. Kyle's jaw tightened. But it's risky. If they side with him instead, we're finished. When would you make this happen? 3 days? There's a meeting already scheduled, representatives from every major family on the East Coast. It was supposed to be about territory disputes in Philadelphia, but I can use it to make our case. Serena's stomach twisted. You're going to put yourself in a room with people who might decide killing you is easier than taking sides. Yes, that's insane. It's our only option. Kael's hand found hers. But I won't do it unless you agree. If you want to run, we run. I'll liquidate everything and we'll disappear. Build a new life somewhere the Bellicaro family can't find us. Could they find us? Eventually? Probably. Then running just delays the inevitable. Maybe, but it keeps you alive longer. Serena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the warehouse, about Don Vittorio's cold smile, about the feeling of Kael's blood pouring through her fingers, about the fact that running meant spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for violence to catch up with them. We fight, she said finally. Are you sure? No, but I'm sure that I'd rather die beside you than live without you. Kael's eyes closed briefly, like her words hurt more than the bullet wound. Then he pulled her against his chest, carefully, mindful of his injury, and held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. 3 days, he murmured against her hair. We have 3 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. Serena wrapped her arms around him and tried not to think about how many ways this could go wrong, tried not to think about all the people who'd already died because Kael had chosen her, tried not to think about the fact that in 3 days she might walk into a room and never walk out. Instead, she held him tighter and told herself that love was worth fighting for, even if the fight destroyed them both. Atta sit. The next 72 hours passed in controlled chaos. Kael directed operations from his bed, laptop balanced on his knees, phone constantly ringing. His men came and went with reports about Bellicaro movements, security upgrades, alliances shifting like sand across the East Coast. Serena learned more about the underworld in those 3 days than she'd learned in her entire life. She learned that the 5 families who controlled the eastern seaboard operated like a deadly chessboard, each one watching the others for signs of weakness. She learned that Don Vittorio had been consolidating power for years, quietly buying loyalty and territory until his influence rivaled even the Moretti organization. She learned that Kael's father had kept the peace through a combination of strategic marriages, calculated violence, and an iron will that never wavered. And she learned that Kael was nothing like his father. Where Antonio Moretti had been cold and calculating, Kael was passionate and impulsive. Where his father had married for alliance, Kael had chosen love. Where Antonio had built his empire on fear and respect, Kael was building his on something more fragile. Trust. Do you think they'll support you? Serena asked on the night before the meeting. She sat curled in the chair beside Kael's bed, watching him review notes on family histories and old grudges. I think they'll do whatever serves their interests, Kael said. If they believe the Bellicaro family is becoming too powerful, they'll want to check that growth. If they believe I'm weak, they'll let Don Vittorio destroy me and divide my territory among themselves. So we need to make you look strong. We need to make them afraid of what happens if they don't intervene. He set aside the laptop. Fear is the only language these men understand. What about love? Kael smiled faintly. Love is what got us into this mess. Do you regret it? Never. His expression turned serious. But I wish I could have kept you out of it. Given you a normal life, with a normal man who doesn't have a target on his back. I don't want normal. Serena moved from the chair to sit beside him on the bed. I want you. Even if wanting me gets you killed? Even then. Kyle pulled her close, kissing her with the kind of desperate intensity that suggested he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow we walk into that room, and we make them understand that destroying us means destroying the balance of power they've spent decades building. Tomorrow we convince them that peace is more profitable than war. Tomorrow we survive, Serena interrupted. That's all we need to do. Survive. Kyle's hand cupped her face. I wish it were that simple. It is that simple. Everything else is just noise. He kissed her again, softer this time. Then they lay together in the darkness, wrapped around each other, listening to the sound of guards patrolling outside and the distant rumble of thunder that promised a storm was coming. The meeting was scheduled for 8 p.m. at a private club in Manhattan, neutral territory owned by the Romano family, who'd stayed carefully uninvolved in the conflict between Moretti and Bellicaro. Kyle dressed in a black suit that made him look every inch the dangerous man he was. The bandage under his shirt was barely visible, but Serena could see him favoring his left side, moving carefully to avoid pulling stitches. She wore another black dress, armor disguised as evening wear, and the necklace Kyle had given her that morning, a single diamond on a delicate chain that probably cost more than her car. For luck, he'd said, fastening it around her neck. Serena had kissed him, instead of pointing out that they'd need more than luck to survive the night. They left the estate surrounded by a convoy of armed men, 6 cars, 20 soldiers, every precaution Kyle could think of. The drive into the city felt like moving through a dream. Streets blurred past. Streetlights cast everything in shades of gold and shadow. Serena held Kyle's hand and tried to memorize the feel of his skin against hers, just in case. The club was an old brownstone in the Upper East Side, the kind of place that looked like a private residence but had hosted mob meetings since before Serena was born. Expensive, discreet, deadly. They walked through the entrance together, Kyle's hand at the small of her back. Inside, a man in a tuxedo directed them toward a private room on the second floor. The stairs felt like climbing to an execution. At the top, 2 guards flanked a heavy wooden door. They nodded to Kyle and opened it. The room beyond was larger than Serena expected. Round table, 12 chairs, dim lighting from sconces on the walls. 5 men already sat waiting, each one representing a family that controlled millions of dollars in legitimate business and billions more in criminal enterprise. At the head of the table sat a man in his 70s. Romano, Serena guessed. White hair, expensive suit, eyes sharp as knives despite his age. To his right sat 2 younger men, the Chicago outfit, if Serena remembered Kyle's briefing correctly. To his left, representatives from the Philadelphia and Boston families. And directly across from the empty seats clearly meant for Kyle and Serena sat Don Vittorio Bellicaro. His shoulder was still bandaged, his face still pale, but his eyes burned with hatred when they landed on Serena. Kyle Moretti, Romano said, his voice surprisingly warm. Thank you for joining us. Please, sit. Kyle pulled out a chair for Serena. She sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, refusing to let her fear show. Kyle sat beside her. The door closed behind them with a sound like a coffin lid. Now then, Romano said, lacing his fingers together. Let's discuss why the East Coast is on the verge of a war that benefits no one. Don Vittorio leaned forward. We're on the verge of war because Kyle Moretti has no honor, because he breaks alliances as easily as normal men break bread, because I chose love over duty, Kyle interrupted, voice calm. And Don Vittorio can't accept that the world is changing. The world is not changing. Men like you are simply getting weaker. Weak is starting a war over hurt pride. Kyle's hands stayed flat on the table, relaxed, but Serena could see the tension in his shoulders. Weak is attacking a woman to punish the man who wouldn't marry your daughter. Your woman, Don Vittorio spat the word, destroyed an alliance that would have united our families. She's a liability, a distraction, and the fact that you can't see that proves you're not fit to lead. Gentlemen, Romano's voice cut through the rising tension, we're not here to debate fitness for leadership. We're here to prevent bloodshed that would destabilize the entire region. Then the solution is simple, one of the Chicago representatives said. Moretti honors his commitment to the Bellicaro family. The girl disappears. Peace is restored. Serena's stomach dropped. Cale's hand found hers under the table. No. No? The man from Boston raised an eyebrow. You're willing to start a war over one woman? I'm willing to defend what's mine, same as any of you would. Cale's voice was steel wrapped in silk. And I'm willing to pay restitution for breaking the engagement. $10 million, territory in Brooklyn, public acknowledgement of fault. Everything except Serena. Your father would be ashamed, Don Vittorio said. My father is dead, and he never understood that power without loyalty is just tyranny waiting to collapse. Pretty words. They won't stop bullets. Neither will your pride. Cale leaned forward, wincing slightly. You want war? Fine. But ask yourself, what happens when you win? When you've destroyed the Moretti organization and carved up our territory, what's stopping Romano or the Chicago outfit from deciding you're the next threat? What's stopping every family at this table from seeing you as the unstable element that needs to be removed? Silence. Don Vittorio's expression darkened. You're threatening them. I'm pointing out reality. The moment you make this personal instead of business, you set a precedent that threatens everyone. Cale's gaze swept the table. How many of you have sons who might fall in love with the wrong woman? How many of you have made deals you later regretted? If we establish that broken engagements mean war, where does it end? The man from Philadelphia shifted uncomfortably. He has a point, Romano said quietly. He has excuses. Don Vittorio stood, the movement clearly painful. And I'm done listening to them. Either you force Moretti to honor his commitment, or the Bellicaro family goes to war. Your choice. Sit down, Vittorio. Romano's voice was suddenly cold. We're not finished. I am. Don Vittorio turned toward the door. If you walk out of this room, Romano said, you walk out alone. No alliances, no support, no backup when Moretti comes for you. Don Vittorio stopped, turned. You would side with him? After everything his father and I built together? I'm not siding with anyone. I'm trying to prevent a war that would cost all of us money and men and stability. Romano gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Down. For a long moment, Serena thought Don Vittorio would refuse. Then he sat. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Here's what's going to happen, Romano said. Cale pays restitution. 15 million, not 10. Plus Brooklyn. Plus a public apology to Isabella Bellicaro. In return, Don Vittorio accepts the payment and calls off any plans for retaliation. Unacceptable, Don Vittorio said. Not finished. Romano's eyes were cold. In addition, both families will enter a non-aggression pact for 5 years. You'll continue operating independently, but you won't interfere in each other's business. Any disputes go through neutral arbitration. And the girl? Don Vittorio asked. The girl stays with Cale. Untouched, unharmed, off limits to everyone at this table. Serena's heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. This is ridiculous, Don Vittorio said. You're rewarding him for dishonor. I'm preventing a war. Romano looked around the table. All in favor? The representatives from Chicago raised their hands. Boston followed. Philadelphia hesitated, then raised his hand too. Motion carries. Romano looked at Don Vittorio. Do you accept these terms? Don Vittorio's hands clenched into fists. His face was purple with rage. For a moment, Serena thought he might pull out a gun and start shooting. Then he said very quietly, I accept. The relief that flooded through Serena was so intense she felt dizzy. Good. Romano stood. Cale, you'll have the money transferred within 72 hours. Don Vittorio, you'll issue a statement to your organization that this matter is resolved. Gentlemen, we're done here. The meeting was over. People started standing, shaking hands, making small talk like they hadn't just been negotiating whether to let a war happen. Cale stood, helping Serena to her feet. Don Vittorio approached. Serena's entire body went tense, but Cale stepped slightly in front of her. This isn't over, Don Vittorio said quietly, loud enough that only they could hear. You think you've won because they forced a treaty, but treaties can be broken, and when they are, when the time is right, I'm going to take everything from you the way you took my daughter's future. Try it, Cale said, and I'll finish what I started in that warehouse. Don Vittorio's smile was arctic. We'll see. Then he walked away, his men falling in behind him like sharks following blood in the water. Romano approached, clasping Kael's hand. That was well played. Your father would have been proud. My father would have married the girl and avoided this entire mess. Perhaps, but he also would have missed out on love. Romano glanced at Serena, his expression softening slightly. I hope she's worth it. She is, Kael said without hesitation. Romano nodded. Then may you both survive what comes next. He left. Slowly the room emptied until only Kael and Serena remained. They stood in the center of the room, hands clasped, breathing hard like they'd just survived a battle. Is it over? Serena whispered. For now. But not forever. No. Kael pulled her into his arms, careful of his injury. Don Vittorio meant what he said. He'll wait. He'll plan. And when he thinks we've let our guard down, he'll strike. So we never let our guard down. Serena, I know what I'm signing up for. She looked up at him. A life of looking over my shoulder, of armed guards and fortified houses and constant threats. I know, and I'm still choosing you. Kael's forehead pressed against hers. I love you. I love you too. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in a room that smelled like expensive cologne and old violence, and Serena finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd survive this. Then Kael's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. What is it? Serena asked. Kael's expression went cold, deadly. Vescari's brothers, he said. The ones who survived the warehouse assault. They just hit one of my shipments, killed 3 of my men. Serena's stomach dropped. I thought you ended that. I thought I did too. Kael was already moving toward the door. But apparently they didn't get the message. Where are you going? To finish this, permanently. Kael, you're still healing. I don't care. He turned back to her, eyes blazing. They killed my men, attacked my operation. If I don't respond immediately and violently, every small-time outfit on the East Coast will think I'm weak. Then let me come with you. Absolutely not. Why? I've already been shot at, kidnapped, and nearly killed. What's one more? No. Kael's voice was final. You're going back to the estate. You're staying behind walls and guards, and you're staying safe while I handle this. I don't want safe. I want to be with you. And I want you alive. He cupped her face, kissing her hard. Please, Serena, let me do this without worrying about you. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist, wanted to stay beside him the way she'd promised, but she saw the fear beneath his determination, the terror that keeping her with him might get her killed. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Go, do what you need to do. I'll wait at the estate. Relief flickered across his face. I'll be back before morning. Promise? Promise. He kissed her again, softer this time. Then he was gone, disappearing through the door with his men falling in around him like wolves. Serena stood alone in the empty room and tried not to think about all the promises Kael had made that he might not be able to keep. Tried not to think about the warehouse, the chair, the blood. Tried not to think about Don Vittorio's smile. Instead, she followed Kael's remaining guards out of the club, into the car, back through the city streets toward the estate, back to the roses and the fortress and the waiting. Always waiting. For violence, for death, for the moment when loving Kael Moretti would finally cost her everything. But as the car pulled through the gates and the mansion rose against the night sky, Serena realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Don Vittorio. Not of the Vescari brothers. Not of the constant threat that came with loving a dangerous man. She was only afraid of losing him. And she'd do anything, risk anything, sacrifice anything to make sure that never happened. Even if it meant becoming as dangerous as the world that wanted to destroy them. The car stopped. Serena climbed out and walked into the mansion alone, surrounded by guards, but feeling the weight of solitude anyway. Kael would come back. He had to. Because if he didn't, Serena would burn the entire East Coast to ash, finding the people responsible. And that terrified her more than anything else. The realization that she'd changed, that loving Kael Moretti had turned her into someone capable of violence, someone capable of revenge, someone who finally understood why men like him fought so viciously to protect what they loved. Because once you found something worth dying for, you'd kill to keep it. Serena walked upstairs to Cale's bedroom and sat by the window, watching the gates, waiting for headlights that would signal his return. And she made herself a promise. If he didn't come back, she'd finish this herself, no matter what it cost, no matter who she had to become. Because love wasn't weakness. It was the most dangerous weapon of all. Kyle didn't come back before morning. Serena sat by the window watching the driveway until the sky turned from black to gray to pale pink, and still no headlights cut through the dawn. Her phone sat silent in her lap. The guards outside changed shifts. Birds started singing in the rose garden. And Kyle didn't come back. By 7 a.m., Serena's hands were shaking from exhaustion and fear and too much coffee. She'd called his phone 16 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. She'd texted. No response. She was about to call the hospital when she heard vehicles in the driveway. Serena ran downstairs, nearly tripping over her own feet, heart hammering against her ribs. The front door opened. 3 of Kyle's men walked in, covered in blood and soot, supporting a fourth between them. Not Kyle. Someone she didn't recognize, unconscious and badly injured. "Where is he?" Serena demanded. The lead man, Carlo, she'd learned his name over the past few days, looked at her with exhausted eyes. "Still at the docks. The Viscari brothers had more men than we anticipated. It turned into a full-scale battle." "Is he hurt?" "He took a hit. Not serious, but he's bleeding. He refused to leave until the job was done." Serena's vision narrowed. "Take me to him." "Miss Vale, it's not safe." "I don't care. Take me to him now." Carlo looked like he wanted to argue. Then he saw her expression and nodded. "Get in the car." The drive to the docks took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Serena watched the city wake up around them, people heading to work, grabbing coffee, living normal lives, and felt the distance between her world and theirs stretching wider with every mile. The docks were industrial, abandoned, the kind of place where violence happened and no one reported it because everyone knew better than to get involved. 2 buildings were still smoking. Bullet holes peppered concrete walls. Bodies lay covered with tarps, waiting for cleanup crews that would make them disappear. Cale stood near a warehouse entrance, phone pressed to his ear, blood streaking down the left side of his face from a cut above his eyebrow. His shirt was torn. His jacket was gone. He looked like he'd been through hell. He looked alive. Serena was out of the car before it fully stopped, running toward him. Cale turned at the sound of her footsteps. His eyes went wide. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "I told you to stay at the estate." Serena slammed into him, wrapping her arms around his waist, not caring about the blood or the pain or the fact that they were standing in the middle of a crime scene. "You promised you'd come back before morning," she said against his chest. "I was handling things. You were bleeding and fighting and not answering your phone." She pulled back to look at him. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was?" Kael's expression softened. His hand came up to cup her face. "I'm sorry. The Viscari brothers brought reinforcements. We had to—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "It's done now. They're dead. All of them. It's over." "Is it?" Serena searched his eyes. "Or is this just going to keep happening? More enemies, more battles, more nights where you don't come home?" "I don't know." The honesty in his voice hurt worse than a lie would have. "This is my life, Serena. This is what it means to run an organization like mine. There's always someone trying to take what's yours, always another threat. Then we deal with them together." She touched the cut above his eyebrow, making him wince. "No more sending me away while you handle things. No more protecting me by keeping me in the dark. If we're doing this, we're doing it as a team." Cale stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, tired and rough and genuine. "You're insane. I learned from the best." He kissed her then, there in the smoking ruins of a battlefield, with dead men cooling under tarps and his soldiers watching with varying degrees of amusement. When they broke apart, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "Okay," he said quietly. "Together. No more walls." "No more walls," Serena agreed. "But you're still not coming to the next gunfight." "We'll see." Kale smiled despite everything, and for the first time since he'd left the club last night, Serena felt like she could breathe again. Guards. The next 3 weeks passed in strange normalcy. The Viscari threat was eliminated. Don Vittorio stayed quiet. honoring the treaty even though his hatred burned through every interaction. The other families watched and waited, but no one made moves against the Moretti organization. Cale healed. The bullet wound in his side closed to a scar. The cut above his eyebrow faded to a thin line. He worked from home more, delegating to his capos, spending evenings with Serena in the rose garden while summer turned the sky lavender and gold. Felt almost peaceful. Serena knew better than to trust it. She'd learned to read the signs now. The way Kael's men clustered near windows when cars passed. The way supplies came and went under cover of darkness. The way every delivery was searched, every visitor vetted, every moment calibrated against the threat of violence. This wasn't peace. It was the eye of a storm. But Serena tried to enjoy it anyway. Tried to memorize the feeling of Kael's hand in hers as they walked through gardens his mother had planted. Tried to savor quiet mornings in bed where the most dangerous thing was how badly she wanted to stay there forever. She moved into the estate officially, gave up her apartment, told Maya a carefully constructed lie about taking a job overseas, burned the last bridges connecting her to the ordinary life she'd left behind. And she didn't regret it. Not even when the nightmares came. Not even when she woke gasping, remembering the warehouse, the chair, the certainty that she was about to die. Because Kael was always there, pulling her close, murmuring reassurances until her breathing steadied and the fear receded. "I've got you," he'd say. "You're safe. I've got you." And she'd believe him, until the night everything changed. It started with a phone call. Serena was in the library, curled in one of the leather chairs with a book she wasn't really reading when she heard Kael's voice from the study down the hall. Sharp, angry. The tone he used when someone had crossed a line. She set down the book and moved quietly toward the door. "Don't care what he's offering," Kael was saying. "The answer is no." A pause while whoever was on the other end responded. "Because I don't trust him. Don Vittorio doesn't make peace offerings unless there's a knife hidden in them." Serena's blood went cold. She pushed the door open. Kael looked up, phone still pressed to his ear. He held up one finger. "Wait. I'll think about it," he said into the phone. "But I'm not promising anything." He hung up and set the phone down with more force than necessary. "What did Don Vittorio want?" Serena asked. Kael scrubbed a hand over his face. "He's proposing a meeting, just the two of us. Says he wants to discuss terms for a permanent alliance." "That's a trap." "Probably." "Then why are you considering it?" "Because if it's not a trap, it's an opportunity to end this permanently, to create actual peace instead of this tense standoff we've been living in." Kael leaned back in his chair, exhaustion written across his features. "I'm tired, Serena. Tired of waiting for the next attack. Tired of sleeping with a gun under my pillow. Tired of watching you flinch every time a car backfires." "So you're going to walk into a meeting with a man who wants you dead on the off chance he's being sincere?" "Yes." "That's insane." "It's calculated risk." Kael stood, moving around the desk toward her. "I'll bring backup. I'll choose the location. I'll control every variable I can. But if there's even a chance this could work, I have to try." Serena wanted to argue, wanted to scream at him that calculated risks still got people killed. But she saw the weight he was carrying. The responsibility of keeping everyone in his organization safe. The burden of leadership that never let him rest. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night." "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "You said no more walls. You said we do this together." Serena stepped closer, holding his gaze. "If you're walking into potential danger, I'm walking in with you." "Serena." "I'm not asking permission, Kael. I'm telling you how this is going to work. Either we both go, or neither of us does." Kael's jaw clenched. She could see him working through arguments, trying to find some way to keep her safe that didn't involve locking her in the estate. Finally, he exhaled roughly. "Fine. But you stay in the car until I verify it's safe. And if anything goes wrong, you run. You don't try to help. You don't try to fight. You get the fuck out and let my men handle it. Deal." "I mean it, Serena." She kissed him to shut him up. When they broke apart, Kael looked torn between frustration and resignation. "You're going to get me killed," he muttered. "Not if I kill anyone who tries first." Despite everything, Kael laughed. "You're terrifying." "I learned from the best," Serena said again. This time, when Kael kissed her, it tasted like goodbye. The meeting was set for a construction site in Queens, half-built luxury condos abandoned when the developer ran out of money. Exposed rebar, concrete shells, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and bodies could disappear into foundations. Serena hated it on sight. They arrived in a convoy, 3 cars, 12 armed men, every precaution Kyle could think of. The sun was setting, painting the skeletal buildings in shades of orange and red that looked too much like fire. Don Vittorio's cars were already there, 4 black SUVs parked in a semicircle around the entrance to the main building. "Stay here," Kale ordered Serena. "Carlo, keep her safe." Carlo nodded, hand resting on the gun at his hip. Kyle climbed out, taking 4 of his men with him. Serena watched through the tinted window as they approached the building. Don Vittorio emerged from one of the SUVs, flanked by his own soldiers. Even from a distance, Serena could see the tension in both groups, fingers near weapons, eyes tracking movement. The 2 men met in the open space between the vehicles. Serena couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read body language. Kyle's posture was defensive. Don Vittorio's was aggressive. Neither man was backing down. "This is wrong," she said. "Boss knows what he's doing," Carlo said. "Does he? Because from here it looks like he's about to..." Movement on the rooftop. Serena saw it before Carlo did. A glint of metal. A figure positioning a rifle. "Sniper!" she screamed, throwing open the car door. Carlo grabbed for her, but she was already running, already screaming Kyle's name. Kyle turned toward her voice. The rifle fired. Kyle went down. Everything after that happened in fragments. Gunfire erupting from multiple directions. Carlo dragging Serena behind a car. Men shouting, glass shattering, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Serena fought against Carlo's grip, screaming Kyle's name, trying to see if he was moving. "Stay down," Carlo shouted. "I need to get to him." "You'll get yourself killed." Another explosion of gunfire. Carlo's grip loosened as he returned fire, and Serena tore free, running low across the open space toward where Kyle had fallen. Bullets kicked up concrete dust around her feet. She didn't stop. Kyle was lying on his side, blood spreading across his chest. His eyes were open, focused on her. "Run," he gasped. "Not without you." Serena grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward cover. He was too heavy, too hurt. She pulled anyway. One of Kyle's men appeared, grabbing his other arm. Together they hauled him behind a concrete barrier as bullets hammered the space they'd just vacated. "How bad?" the man asked. Kyle coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "Bad." Serena pressed her hands against the wound in his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. There was so much blood, too much. "Stay with me," she begged. "Kyle, please." His hand found hers, slick with blood. "I'm sorry." "Don't you dare apologize. Don't you fucking dare. Should have listened to you. Should have known it was a trap. You can tell me you're an idiot later. Right now, you need to stay alive." Kyle smiled, weak and fading. "Bossy. Always." The gunfire was intensifying. Kyle's men were returning fire, but they were outnumbered. Don Vittorio had planned this perfectly. Lured them into an ambush with the promise of peace. "We need to move," the man beside Serena said. "Get the boss to a hospital." "He won't survive the drive," Serena said. She could see it in Kyle's eyes. The way his breathing was getting shallow, the way his skin was turning gray. "Then what?" "Cover me," Serena said. She stood, hands raised, and walked out from behind the concrete barrier. "Stop shooting!" she screamed. The gunfire didn't stop immediately, but it slowed. Confused, Don Vittorio emerged from behind one of his SUVs, gun in hand. "The girl," he said, almost pleased. "I was hoping you'd be here." "You want to kill me?" Serena's voice was steady despite the terror flooding her system. "Fine, but let Kyle go, get him medical attention, and I'll surrender." "Serena, no!" Kale's voice behind her, weak and desperate. "You're not in a position to negotiate," Don Vittorio said. "Neither are you. You kill Kyle, and every family on the East Coast will turn against you. They forced a treaty. They won't forgive you for breaking it so publicly." Serena took a step forward. "But if you let him live, you can claim this was a misunderstanding, a security issue, rogue soldiers. You keep your alliances, you keep your power, and you get revenge by taking me instead." Don Vittorio studied her, weighing the offer. "Why would you sacrifice yourself for him?" "Him?" he asked. Because I love him. Serena's voice broke. And love means protecting the people who matter more than your own life. Behind her, Kael was trying to stand, trying to stop her. His men held him down. Don Vittorio smiled his terrible smile. Very well, he said. Your life for his. My men will take you. And Kael Moretti gets to live knowing that loving you cost you everything. He raised his gun, pointing it at Serena's chest. She closed her eyes. The gunshot was deafening. But Serena didn't feel pain. She opened her eyes. Don Vittorio was staring at the hole in his chest with an expression of complete shock. The gun fell from his hand. He dropped to his knees, then fell face first onto the concrete. Behind him stood Marco Bellicaro, Don Vittorio's son, with a smoking pistol in his hand. Enough, Marco said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Every gun in the construction site was suddenly pointed at Marco. He didn't lower his weapon, just stood there, looking at his father's body with an expression Serena couldn't read. My father, Marco said, voice carrying across the site, was a great man, but he let pride blind him, let personal vendetta override good business, and that made him a liability. One of Don Vittorio's soldiers took a step forward. Marco's gun swung toward him. Don't, Marco warned. I'm the heir. I'm the new Don, and my first order is to honor the treaty. No more attacks on the Moretti organization. No more revenge for slights that don't matter. We go back to business. You killed your own father, someone said, horrified. I saved my family from his mistakes. Marco's expression was cold, final. Anyone who has a problem with that can join him. No one moved. Slowly, Marco lowered his weapon. He walked toward Serena, stepping over his father's body without looking down. Get Moretti to a hospital, he said. Consider my father's debt paid. Then he walked back to his vehicles, and his men followed. Within minutes, the Bellicaro family was gone, leaving their dead behind. Serena ran back to Kael. He was still conscious, barely, hands pressed against his chest wound. His men were already loading him into a car. Hospital, one of them barked. Now! Serena climbed in beside Kael, cradling his head in her lap as the car peeled out. You're an idiot, she told him, tears streaming down her face. You were going to sacrifice yourself, he gasped, because you're worth it. So are you. His hand found hers again. Don't ever do that again. Then don't get shot again. Deal. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Serena's life. Kael drifted in and out of consciousness. His breathing got shallower. The blood kept coming, but he held on to her hand the entire time. And when they finally pulled up to the emergency entrance, when doctors and nurses swarmed the car, when they loaded Kael onto a gurney and rushed him inside, his eyes found hers one last time. I love you, he mouthed. I love you too, Serena said. Then they took him through doors she couldn't follow, and she was left standing in the parking lot covered in his blood, praying to whoever was listening that love would be enough to keep him alive. The surgery took 8 hours. Serena sat in the waiting room with Carlo and the other survivors from Kael's team, watching the clock tick by with agonizing slowness. At hour 3, Marco Bellicaro's lawyer arrived with papers, a formal peace treaty, territory concessions, financial arrangements. Everything Kael had originally offered, now being honored by the new Don. Serena signed on Kael's behalf, too exhausted to process what it meant. At hour 5, the hospital administrator tried to make her leave because she wasn't family. Carlo pulled out enough cash to make the problem disappear. At hour 7, Serena's hands finally stopped shaking. At hour 8, a surgeon emerged, still in bloody scrubs. He's alive, the surgeon said. The bullet missed his heart by 2 centimeters. We repaired the damage, but the next 48 hours are critical. If he makes it through without complications, he should recover fully. Serena couldn't breathe. Can I see him? He's in recovery, unconscious. But yes, you can see him. They led her through sterile white hallways to a room that smelled like antiseptic and death. Kael lay in a hospital bed, pale as the sheets, connected to machines that beeped steadily. But his chest was rising and falling. He was breathing. He was alive. Serena pulled a chair beside the bed and took his hand, careful of the IV. You're not allowed to die, she told his unconscious form. You hear me? You promised we'd do this together, so you need to wake up and keep that promise. His hand was warm in hers. She held on and waited. Mata. Kael woke 3 days later. Serena was asleep in the chair beside his bed, head pillowed on her arms, when she felt him squeeze her hand. Her eyes flew open. Kael was looking at her, pale and exhausted, but unmistakably alive. "Hey," he said, voice rough from the breathing tube they'd removed yesterday. "Hey yourself." Serena's voice cracked. "You scared the shit out of me. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't get shot anymore. I'll try." He looked around the hospital room, taking inventory. "How long?" 3 days. You had surgery. They said you're going to be fine." "Don Vittorio?" "Dead. Marco killed him. Made peace." Serena filled him in on everything that had happened, watching his expression shift from surprise to grim satisfaction. "So it's over," Kael said when she finished. "For now. You don't sound convinced. I've learned not to trust peace in your world." Serena squeezed his hand. "There's always another enemy. Another threat." "Not this time." Kael's eyes were serious. "Marco is smart, practical. He won't break the treaty unless I give him reason, and I won't." "Because you're retiring from mob life?" "Because I have something worth protecting more than territory or pride, or my father's legacy." He pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "You." Serena's throat tightened. "You're delirious from pain medication." "I'm serious. The moment I woke up and saw you here, I realized something. I've spent my entire life building an empire I never wanted, maintaining alliances I didn't care about, becoming the man my father expected instead of the man I wanted to be." His pale eyes met hers. "I'm done with that. Done sacrificing everything for an organization that nearly got you killed." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm stepping back, promoting Carlo to handle day-to-day operations, keeping just enough control to maintain respect, but delegating the violence and the politics and the constant warfare to people who actually want it." Kael's grip on her hand tightened. "I'm choosing you, Serena. Completely. No more divided loyalties, no more putting business before us." Serena stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You'd give up everything for me? I almost died for you. Giving up a job I hate is easy by comparison." "Kael, marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Serena's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. Make this permanent. Make us permanent." Kael struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. "I know I'm a disaster. I know loving me has nearly killed you multiple times. I know I'm asking you to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder and dealing with guards, and living in a world you never wanted. But I love you more than I've ever loved anything. And I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing you're mine." Serena was crying now, tears streaming down her face faster than she could wipe them away. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard," she said. Kael smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes, you idiot." She leaned forward carefully, mindful of his injuries, and kissed him while machines beeped around them and sunlight streamed through the hospital windows. When they finally broke apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring," he said. "I don't care. I'll get you one, something ridiculously expensive and completely inappropriate." "I'd expect nothing less." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in a sterile hospital room, and Serena finally let herself believe that maybe they'd survived the worst of it. Maybe the violence was behind them. Maybe they could actually build something resembling a normal life. It was probably naive, but Serena didn't care. She'd survived kidnapping, gunfights, and nearly losing the man she loved. She could survive being optimistic. Kael was released from the hospital 2 weeks later with strict orders for bed rest, physical therapy, and no strenuous activity for at least 6 weeks. He ignored most of it. Within 3 days, he was working from the estate, restructuring the organization, promoting Carlo, delegating responsibilities he'd been carrying alone for too long. Within a week, he'd purchased an engagement ring that probably cost more than Serena's entire childhood home. Within 2 weeks, he was walking without wincing and planning a wedding that was either going to be the event of the year or a security nightmare. Probably both. Serena watched him transform, saw the weight lifting from his shoulders as he shed responsibilities that had been crushing him since his father died. He smiled more, laughed easier. looked at her like she was the best decision he'd ever made instead of a complication that had nearly destroyed his empire. The wedding was set for late October when the roses would still be blooming but the heat would have broken. It was small, 50 people, all carefully vetted, all people Kale trusted not to turn the ceremony into an assassination attempt. Marco Bellicaro sent his blessing and a case of wine worth more than a car. The other families sent gifts and representatives acknowledging the union as legitimate, as binding, as permanent. Serena wore white because Kael insisted, even though she argued it felt ridiculous given everything they'd been through. "You deserve white," he'd said, kissing her temple. "You deserve everything." The ceremony took place in the rose garden behind the estate, surrounded by flowers Maria had tended with obsessive care. The same roses Kael's mother had planted before she died. Kael wore a black suit that made him look dangerously beautiful. Serena wore a dress that made her feel like someone who belonged in his world, instead of someone faking it. They exchanged vows in front of people who'd seen them nearly die multiple times. And when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Kael pulled Serena close and kissed her like she was the only thing that mattered in the entire world, because to him, she was. The reception was elegant chaos. Good food, expensive wine, guards stationed at every entrance just in case. But no violence came. No attacks, no threats. Just music and dancing and the feeling of something ending and something else beginning. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had left and the remaining few were drunk and happy, Kael pulled Serena away from the party. They walked through the rose garden alone, fingers laced together, listening to music drift from the house. "Happy?" Kael asked. "Terrified," Serena admitted. "But yes, happy." "What are you terrified of?" "That this is too good to last. That I'm going to wake up and discover it was all a dream. That something's going to come destroy this before we even get to enjoy it." Kael stopped walking, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his pale eyes were almost luminous. "Nothing is going to destroy this," he said. "I won't let it. We've survived everything the world could throw at us. We've earned peace." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just noise." He pulled her closer, hand settling on her waist. "And I'm done letting noise dictate my life." Serena's hand slid up his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palms. "What if there's another enemy? Another threat? Then we'll handle it. Together. The way we handle everything." "You sound so sure." "I am sure. Because I know what matters now. And it's not territory or reputation or maintaining my father's legacy. It's this." He gestured between them. "It's you. It's us. It's building something that's ours instead of inheriting something that was never mine to begin with." Serena kissed him, slow and deep, tasting wine and certainty and the future they were choosing. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Kael's arms tightened around her. "More than I ever thought I was capable of loving anything." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other beneath roses that had survived decades of violence and neglect, and still bloomed every year without fail. Eventually, they walked back to the house, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, together. 6 months later, Serena stood in the rose garden with dirt under her fingernails and sweat on her forehead, helping Maria plant new varieties. The estate had become home in a way she'd never expected. Not comfortable, exactly. Not safe in any traditional sense. But hers. Theirs. Kael had kept his promise. He'd stepped back from the day-to-day violence, delegating to Carlo and other trusted capos. He still made the big decisions, still commanded respect, but he'd stopped carrying the weight of the entire organization alone. He smiled more now, slept better, looked at Serena like she'd saved his life instead of nearly costing it. The peace with the Bellicaro family held. Marco proved to be a practical leader, more interested in profit than revenge. He sent Serena a Christmas gift, a first edition of her favorite novel with an inscription that read, "For the woman who changed everything." She kept it in the library. The other families adjusted to the new dynamic. Some tested boundaries, seeing if Kael's retreat meant weakness. They learned quickly that it didn't, that delegating violence to people who enjoyed it just made the violence more efficient. Serena learned to live with the guards, the security measures, the constant awareness that danger lurked at the edges of their carefully constructed peace. She also learned that love in Kyle world wasn't the fairy tale version she'd grown up believing in. It was messier, darker, stained with blood, and built on foundations that would horrify normal people. But it was real, and it was hers. One evening in late spring, almost a year after the warehouse incident that had started everything, Serena found Kyle in his study, reviewing reports with the kind of focused intensity that suggested something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. He looked up, expression unreadable. "Carlo called. There's a new player trying to move into our territory. Small operation, but ambitious." Serena's stomach tightened. "Do you need to handle it?" "No, that's Carlo's job now." Cale set down the papers. "But I wanted to tell you. No more walls, remember?" "I remember." She moved into the room, perching on the edge of his desk. "Are you worried?" "A little. Old habits." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "But I trust Carlo, and I trust that if it becomes something I need to deal with personally, you and I will handle it together." "Like we handle everything." "Like we handle everything," Kyle agreed. Serena looked at him, this dangerous, damaged man who'd chosen her over everything he'd been raised to value, and felt something shift in her chest. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words hung in the air between them. Cale went very still. "What?" "I found out this morning. I was going to wait to tell you, but—" She shrugged. "No more walls." Cale's expression cycled through shock, fear, and something that might have been joy. "You're sure?" "I took 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but—" He kissed her before she could finish, hard and desperate and filled with emotions he couldn't articulate. When they broke apart, his hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I'm terrified," Serena admitted. "We live in a world where people get kidnapped and shot, where enemies attack when they see weakness, where bringing a child into this might be the most selfish thing we could do. Is that a no?" "That's a yes. I'm happy, terrified and happy, and completely unsure if we're ready for this. But yes." Cale's smile was radiant. "We're going to be terrible at this." "Probably. And our kid is going to grow up surrounded by guards and danger and constant security measures. Definitely. But they'll also grow up knowing they're loved, protected, worth fighting for." Cale's hand moved to rest against her still flat stomach. "And that's more than a lot of kids get." Serena covered his hand with hers. "We're really doing this. We're really doing this." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, contemplating a future neither of them had planned, but both wanted more than they'd expected. Finally, Kyle said, "I need to increase security, reinforce the estate, make sure every contingency is covered." "Later," Serena interrupted. "Right now, just be here with me. Just be happy." He looked at her, and she saw him make the choice, saw him set aside the planning and the worry and the constant vigilance, saw him choose joy. "Okay," he said softly. "Just happy." He kissed her again, slow and gentle, and Serena let herself believe that maybe everything would be okay. Maybe the violence really was behind them. Maybe they could raise a child in this world and give them something resembling a normal life. It was naive. But Serena had learned that sometimes naive hope was the most dangerous weapon of all, because it made you fight harder, made you refuse to give up, made you believe that love could survive anything, even the darkness that lurked at the edges of their carefully constructed peace. 3 years later, Serena stood in the rose garden watching their daughter toddle between flower beds, chasing butterflies with the kind of fearless joy only 3-year-olds possessed. Elena Rose Moretti had her father's pale eyes and her mother's stubborn determination. She had no idea that the men shadowing her at a discreet distance were armed guards. Had no idea that the beautiful house she lived in was a fortress designed to keep danger out. She just knew she was loved. Kyle appeared beside Serena, wrapping an arm around her waist. "She's going to be covered in dirt." "Good. Dirt washes off. Childhood doesn't last." Spoken like someone who doesn't have to give her a bath tonight. Serena elbowed him. "You're giving her a bath. I did it yesterday." "Fine, but I'm not responsible if she floods the bathroom again." They watched Elena discover a ladybug and squeal with delight, and Serena felt the weight of everything they'd survived settle into something resembling contentment. It wasn't the life she'd imagined 3 years ago, standing in a ballroom serving champagne to people who could buy and sell her entire existence. It was better, messier, more complicated, stained with violence and built on choices that would horrify the person she used to be. But it was hers. Kyle had kept his promises. He'd stepped back from active leadership, maintained peace with rival families, built a life that prioritized them over the organization. He still carried a gun, still had nightmares about the warehouse, still sometimes looked at Serena like he couldn't believe she'd stayed. But he was happy, and so was she. Elena ran toward them, arms outstretched, covered in grass stains and pure joy. Kyle scooped her up, spinning her around while she shrieked with laughter. "Papa, again!" "Again? You want your old man to throw out his back?" "You're not old," Serena said. "Tell that to my knees." He spun Elena again anyway because he could never deny her anything, and Serena watched them with a fullness in her chest that threatened to overflow. This was worth it. Every kidnapping, every gunfight, every moment of terror. Worth it for this. For afternoons in a garden that had survived decades of violence and still bloomed every year without fail. For a daughter who knew nothing of the darkness that had brought her parents together. For a man who'd chosen love over legacy and never regretted it. Maria appeared on the garden path, waving them toward the house. "Dinner's ready." They walked back together, Kyle carrying Elena on his shoulders, Serena holding his free hand, the guards trailing behind at a discreet distance. Inside, the table was set. Not for a formal dinner with dangerous men making deals over expensive wine, just for family. Carlo was there with his wife, having become as much a brother to Kyle as an employee. A few trusted friends. Maria, who'd been there through everything and had become a grandmother figure to Elena. They ate and talked and laughed, and for a few hours, it was possible to forget that violence lurked at the edges of their peace. Possible to forget that Kyle's world was built on foundations most people would run from. Possible to believe that love really was enough to keep them safe. After dinner, after Elena was bathed and tucked into bed, Serena found Kyle standing by the window in their bedroom, looking out over the rose garden. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am." His hands covered hers. "How different my life would be if you hadn't walked up to me in that ballroom and called me a coward. You'd have married Isabella, built your alliance, lived the life your father wanted. I'd have been miserable." Kyle turned in her arms, pulling her close. "I wouldn't have known it, but I'd have been miserable anyway. Do you ever regret it? Everything you gave up?" "Never." The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. "You and Elena are worth more than any empire, more than any alliance, more than anything my father built." Serena looked up at him, this man who'd been shaped by violence but chose gentleness, who'd been raised to value power but chose love instead. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He kissed her forehead. "More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." They stood at the window together, watching moonlight paint the roses silver, listening to the sounds of the estate settling into night around them. And Serena finally believed what Kyle had been telling her all along. They'd survived. The violence was behind them. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility instead of threat. It wasn't the fairy tale ending she'd grown up believing in. It was better. Because it was real. Earned through blood and terror and choosing each other every single day, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Serena had spent her life being invisible among the rich and dangerous. Now she stood beside the most dangerous man on the East Coast, not as his weakness, but as his equal, his partner, his wife, the mother of his child. And the woman who taught him that love wasn't weakness at all. It was the most dangerous weapon of all. Because once you found something worth dying for, you'd kill to keep it. You'd sacrifice everything. You'd walk through fire and blood and darkness. And you'd emerge on the other side not unscathed, but stronger for the scars. Serena turned in Kyle's arms, kissing him slowly, tasting the future on his lips. And in the rose garden below, planted by a woman who'd died before Serena was born, the flowers bloomed without fail, year after year, surviving everything the world threw at them. Just like the love they'd fought so hard to keep.